On May 16th of the year 2167, the demon clan had taken the last remaining part of humanity's territory. The human world had completely fallen, but there was still one last hope. Si-chun, Demon Lord Lan Yu, who had conquered everything, asks whether the protagonist truly thinks he is worthy of being called humanity's last hope, because his entire race is nothing more than fragile trash, and now he needs to show the only value he has left by becoming his food and his strength. The Demon Lord begins absorbing the protagonist's power, but he refuses, because his sister, his companions, his master, and everyone closest to him were killed by those damned demons, and even if it is for everyone who is already gone, he needs to take Lan Yu down with him. He activates his ultimate SS-level skill, Bow of the End. The Demon Lord is surprised, asking what is happening since he cannot move. With his final breath, the protagonist remembers his sister, his father, and even his mother, promising that they will soon be together again. Even so, a deep sense of guilt gnawed away at him from the inside, because if he had been strong enough, if he could have become just a little stronger, none of this would have happened. If he could have discovered everything sooner, if he had managed to stop the first demon lord who appeared, he would not have lost everything so early in his life. Suddenly, he slowly opens his eyes and is surprised to see that he has not died. Still extremely confused, he tries to understand where he is and looks outside, seeing that everything is normal, with people smiling and living their lives as usual. To him, that is impossible to believe because the world had been completely destroyed. So where had all these people been hiding all this time? It takes him some time to accept one thing. He managed to return 10 years into the past, back to his college days. While he is processing all of this, something appears beside him, saying that the fusion of the power of gluttony has been completed. Apparently, he had returned to a time before any of that happened. The date truly shows that he has gone back 10 years into the past, and this is exactly 3 years before the Demon Lord's descent. 3 years from now, the first Demon Lord will descend, and he is the one who opens the portal to hell. The other Demon Lords come afterward because of everything that happens. That is the beginning of the destruction, and that is why he lost everything he loved. But now that he has returned, if he can defeat the first Demon Lord who appears, he will be able to prevent the portal to hell from opening, and will have a chance to change everything and protect everyone. But before thinking about all of that, he still needs to understand what the interface of that power of gluttony is and what exactly it means. Ever since he opened his eyes in his new life, it has been floating beside him, right in front of his face. Suddenly, the interface changes, resembling game statistics. The interface displays his strength among other things, and the protagonist realizes that those cannot be his current stats. However, this is something he had never seen before in his previous life. He had always fought using only his awakened power. Only 1 in 10,000 people in the world can become an awakened. The school where he studied only accepts those with potential, the National University of the Awakened. But unfortunately, in his previous life, he never managed to awaken during college, and spent 4 years at the bottom of the food chain, where anyone could beat him without him being able to fight back. And perhaps that is exactly why he woke up in the infirmary. Once again, the interface changes, displaying Divine Flash. There is also Electric Blade. It condenses electricity into a blade. Its attacks have an increased critical hit rate, and striking a vital point causes paralysis. This is precisely the class he had in his previous life. He concentrates a little more and feels power flowing through his body, and perhaps the power from his previous life has returned along with him. And to see whether that truly happened, he decides to test his strength immediately. But at that moment, Ma Long appears and is extremely happy to see that his friend has awakened. The protagonist says that he is perfectly fine now, but notices that the others cannot see the interface floating right beside him. Ma Long looks over his body and sees that his injuries have already disappeared, even though he had taken a severe beating the day before. His recovery ability is even faster than Ma Long's own, despite Ma Long already being an awakened. The protagonist remembers that boy perfectly because he is his roommate. Ma Long had awakened in college, but he had always remained at the bottom of the class. In his previous life, that boy died on the 3rd day after the Demon Lords descended. But now he is alive and standing right in front of him. And only now does the protagonist truly feel that he has indeed regressed through time. Excited about the entire situation, Ma Long points out that tomorrow is the level test, and now that the protagonist is fine, they need to return immediately to prepare. Even though he has not awakened, it still counts toward the graduation exam, so they need to go back immediately. While walking through the university, the protagonist comments that it has been a very long time since he has seen so many living people, but his friend becomes slightly frightened and asks what he is talking about. However, he notices something and asks the protagonist to go around the field. Si-chun, however, has his mind somewhere else, because he has already lost everything once, and if he does nothing, that desperate future will return once again. Therefore, he cannot waste any time and needs to level up as quickly as possible. At that time, the only way to level up was by killing monsters inside demonic dens. However, almost all of them were controlled by the major guilds. Outsiders had no chance of leveling up at all. And if those really are the attributes he saw, then how could he compare them with those of other awakened and monsters? To distinguish their strength, the government created ranks for both the awakened and monsters. From highest to lowest, the classifications are as follows: S, A, B, C, D, and E. Most college students remain at E rank. Only a few geniuses or people with connections to guilds can reach D rank. And even though he can get a rough idea from his experience level, he still does not know how much level 1 is worth compared to the other ranks, but he is certainly stronger than his friend. Suddenly, a basketball hits Ma Long in the face, and several people who had been sitting nearby begin mocking them, saying that those two losers are here again, and that this time they managed to recover very quickly. Frightened, Ma Long thinks they are extremely unlucky because they have run into those people again. One of the men points out that he had already said those two could take a lot of beatings. However, they already knew he was playing basketball there, so they should have brought 2 cases of drinks. Completely frightened, Ma Long apologizes and says he will go buy them immediately. But the protagonist intervenes, saying that those idiots are the ones in the wrong, so they should be the ones apologizing. The moment he sees those people, his gaze quickly changes because he remembers the memories of his previous life perfectly. He and his friend were bullied almost every day. While those people mocked and humiliated them, they could do nothing to defend themselves, which means that pure evil does not exist only inside demonic dens. It also exists among humans. After he says that, the same bullies think the protagonist is asking to die. Completely terrified, Ma Long asks what he is trying to do. Kong Chung stands up and activates his abilities. He is an E-rank warrior, but the protagonist knows that this guy only bullies others because his older brother is the president of the student council and the strongest person in the school, since Kong Chung himself is not actually that strong. The other people are mocking the situation, watching as the protagonist and his friend are about to get beaten again. Even though he has just left the infirmary since one of them is the weakest awakened and the other has not even awakened yet. Kong Chung stops directly in front of the protagonist and asks what he just said. Without hesitation, Si-chun tells him that from now on, he had better never cross his path again, otherwise things will not end well. Kong Chung cannot believe that a loser is saying something like that to him and tries to attack, but with a single movement, the protagonist blocks the attack, causing him intense pain. The other students stop mocking them and stare in surprise, asking what just happened and how that boy managed to block Kong Chung's punch when he had not even awakened yet. Kong Chung only becomes more furious, because a weakling like him who had not even awakened dared to challenge him. But that is exactly what the protagonist wants. Now he can test some of his abilities. He switches classes and activates the awakened power from his previous life, doubling his strength and tripling his speed. Ma Long cannot believe that his friend has awakened. Kong Chung uses indestructible demonic armor, saying that apparently the protagonist has forgotten what his fist tastes like. He tries to attack once again, but the protagonist's speed and strength are completely beyond those of his opponent. In the blink of an eye, he closes the distance and sends Kong Chung flying with a single blow. Everyone around them cannot believe what they are seeing, asking whether he is really the same weakling as before. Even after being humiliated, Kong Chung still cannot accept what happened and says that the protagonist was only lucky enough to catch him off guard. He asks his companions if they are really just going to stand there and watch. However, One of his companions is completely terrified as he sees that murderous aura approaching, as if a real demon were coming toward him. Kong Chung tries to attack once again, but the protagonist grabs his arm and breaks it, saying that his opponent is far too weak and is not even useful for testing his abilities. He lands another punch, sending Kong Chung crashing into the wall and knocking him out once and for all. Ma Long still cannot understand how his friend became so strong. Even though that fight was far too easy, Si Chen still managed to draw a few conclusions. Just like in his previous life, he can switch into electric assassin mode whenever he wants, and even at level 1, just as he had imagined, his normal stats are already enough to deal with max level awakened, which shows that his level is above E rank. However, he still has not figured out what rank his power truly belongs to, but that is not even the biggest problem because he defeated an opponent and his level did not change at all. He uses his electric sword and everyone becomes completely terrified. He places the electric blade beside the bully's neck, thinking that perhaps the way to gain experience is also the same as in his previous life. But before he can do anything, a woman arrives and tells the protagonist that they are still at school, and even though Kong Chung was the one who started it, everything he has suffered is already more than enough punishment. She is Ling Yu, the vice president of the student council. She points out that the boy will never dare to bother the two of them again. The protagonist releases the bully and realizes that the student council members really are far too eager to protect that useless piece of trash. However, he was not actually going to do anything else to Kong Chung, but if he does not truly frighten those people, sooner or later they will start bothering him again. The other two bullies are hiding nearby. The white-haired one says that the protagonist's expression was so terrifying at that moment that they truly thought they might die, so it is better never to mess with that guy again. However, the black-haired one asked whether those two are really still the weakest and poorest students in the school, but the vice president does not believe that they are the weakest and poorest anymore. Sometime later in the dormitory, Ma Long has told his roommates everything that happened, but none of them believes that the protagonist truly awakened and obtained an extremely powerful electric assassin class, since he had completely humiliated the bullies. Xiang Zhua, an E-rank core mage, asks where the protagonist went if all of that is really true. Ma Long tries to change the subject because the protagonist had said that he needed to go running, but Xiang Zhua asks why he should keep running now that he has become so strong. Does an awakened still need such basic physical training? That does not even make sense. Xiang Yu, another roommate in an E-rank enchantment class awakened, thinks that Ma Long's brain must have been damaged from taking so many beatings. He continues by saying that the four of them ended up in the same dorm room because their evaluations ranked among the bottom 4 in the entire year, and that is a fact that cannot be changed. Besides, he ranks 4th from the bottom, which means he is the strongest person in that dormitory. Each person can awaken only one class in their entire life, and the other two are merely enchantment supports, while he is the only combat type awakened in the dormitory, a core mage, and that is another fact that cannot be changed. Xiang Zhua thinks Si Chen's hands are far too soft and weak, so there is no way he could have awakened as an electric assassin, not to mention that he knows he has become a little stronger over the past few days and might even be able to join a club. Xiang Yu points out that tomorrow is the final level evaluation before the graduation exam. Then everything will become clear, including whether Ma Long is actually telling the truth. Meanwhile, at the E-rank training grounds, Gong Yuan, the president of the student council, and Kong Cheng's older brother, finishes his training. He tells everyone that today's training has already come to an end, but when he looks to the side, he sees his younger brother leaning nearby and asks why he is waiting there. Kong Cheng says that if his brother does not do anything, he will not be able to sleep that night, because the protagonist humiliated his younger brother in front of everyone, so it is obvious that he does not respect the president of the student council. Gong Yuan points out that he already knows the entire story and promises to deal with it as soon as possible. A short while later during dinner, Ling Yu asks how the president intends to handle the situation. The president says that his younger brother only lost because he was weaker, but he wants to know whether the protagonist is really that strong. Ling Yu knows that Gong Yuan is familiar with the level and strength of everyone in the school, and fewer than 10 people there have managed to reach D rank. The president recruited every single one of them into his club. In addition, no one else has a chance to enter a den. Those average awakened have no way to improve, which means no one can keep up with the president's pace. However, the protagonist is still training even in the middle of a storm, carrying an extra 100 kilograms while running more than 20 kilometers. He knows that basic training can improve the quality of the body, and a Awaken's limit is proportional to their physical strength. Only with a powerful body can someone withstand and unleash the extreme power of their profession. But even that is still far from enough. In 2160, the demon Lord Fury emerged from a den and descended into the world. He killed countless humans in a single instant. The protagonist's only family, including his younger sister, was among those people. It was that same demon lord who opened the gates of hell and allowed the other demon lords to enter that world. So the goal of his first phase is to kill that piece of trash in the cruelest way possible, because he is the beginning of all the destruction. At this moment, there are 3 years left before the first demon lord appears, and he is certainly growing just as quickly as before, so the protagonist needs to surpass that speed. While focused on his training, he receives a call from Siyun. He answers, and his sister anxiously asks why he called her so many times that day. Explaining that she had gone to compete, her phone ran out of battery, and it shut off. As soon as she returned to the dormitory, she plugged it in and contacted him. Even so, she excitedly wants to share some good news, because if she manages to win the prize this time, they will be able to solve the problem of their overdue rent. While she talks and smiles, the protagonist remains silent because in that distorted future, he had prayed so many times that he could no longer remember how many. Asking whether he could ever go back and start everything over again. His sister asks what is wrong and why he is not saying anything, but the protagonist knows that even if he has to pay any price, even if he falls into endless hell and suffers unbearable pain for all eternity, he needs to protect them. Even if he has to destroy anything that tries to stop him, whether men, women, demons, or gods, anything that threatens his family will be erased from existence. With his tears hidden by the rain, he tells his sister that he was silent because he wanted to hear her voice, since it had been a very long time since he last heard her speak. His sister becomes a little confused by what he says, because they had spoken only 2 days, but she promises that when the competition is over, they will meet. For now, he only needs to wait for the good news she will bring after winning the prize. Si-chun feels that everything has truly started over now. That gives him even more strength to achieve his goal, so he decides to train even harder than before. He needs to become strong as quickly as possible to protect everything he loves. 8 hours have already passed since he returned to this new timeline, and he is beginning to get used to his new body. Even though it is not as strong as his body from the past, it is still a young body, and now he needs to think about what matters most. To level up, he needs to enter a den, but all of them are monopolized by the guilds. Outsiders have no chance to improve, so how is he supposed to get anywhere near a monster like this? The power of gluttony is still something he does not fully understand. As soon as he falls asleep, the system begins to initialize, and once the loading is complete, the interface changes, saying that the gluttony system has just been initialized. The protagonist is thrown into some strange place, and when he looks ahead, he sees an incredibly strange tower surrounded by a red river. Si-chun asks what kind of place this is because he was asleep only a few seconds ago. Completely unable to understand what is happening, he stares at the tower, trying to figure out what it really is. But at that moment, several monsters begin to appear. They are Funeral Flame's E-rank warriors. He switches classes again and realizes that they are magical beasts, and that he may be inside some kind of demonic den. Although he still does not understand any of this at all, he still needs to deal with the problem directly in front of him. As soon as the magical beasts charge at him, the protagonist begins eliminating everyone that approaches. But as soon as he defeats the first one, the system says that he has obtained 3 Funeral Flame Fangs. He goes on defeating all the others because, with his current strength, dealing with those E-rank monsters is extremely easy for him. After defeating several monsters, the protagonist thinks that the sensation feels far too real and does not even seem like a dream. His experience is also increasing, and he suddenly rises to level 2. He is surprised to see that he really can gain experience. In addition, all of his attributes increase by 5 points, which means that he truly gained a demonic den that he can clear by himself as many times as he wants. The boss, the Funeral Flame King, appears, But the protagonist defeats him just as easily because this is where he will train to achieve his goal as quickly as possible. By defeating that monster alone, he gains another level, 18 fangs and one more crystal. The boss's experience is several times greater than that of ordinary monsters of the same rank. He managed to gain 2 levels in a very short amount of time. However, the surprises are not over yet. With all those monsters dead, something appears above their bodies, saying that they are devourable. The protagonist does not know exactly what that means, but he decides to test it, thinking that perhaps the power of gluttony means that, as he begins devouring that monster, he completely absorbs its essence. With that, the monster is absorbed and turns into a card. The Funeral Flame King possesses a frost physique, granting immunity to cold and increasing all resistances in low-temperature environments. The protagonist finally realizes that he can eliminate and devour his opponents, transforming them into his own classes. He perfectly remembers the last thing he saw in his previous life, because this is the power of Demon Lord Lanyu. The power of gluttony, which belonged to the Demon Lord, was stolen by him. Classes are born with differences in strength, and one thing that cannot be changed is that each person can possess only a single class. But now he already possesses 2 classes at the same time. However, if he can devour other magical beasts, he will be able to possess infinite classes, which means that his strength truly has no limit whatsoever. Still, there is one mystery left to solve. He knows nothing about what that magic tower behind him means. But at that moment, an immensely powerful pressure descends upon him. A demon appears in front of the tower, saying that the protagonist has finally arrived because he has been waiting for him for a long time. The Lord calls Si-chun by his own name. The government classified the awakened and magical beasts into ranks according to their combat power. In his previous life, he almost died trying to advance to S rank. Right now, his combat power is at most D rank. And with a single move from that lord, he is sent flying backward, which clearly means that his opponent is an S-rank boss. The difference in rank is so enormous that his attributes are completely overwhelmed by that man's pressure alone. Si-chun asks what kind of demonic den this is and why there is an S-rank monster standing right in front of him. More importantly, why does he know his name? Since he has no answers to any of those questions and does not know how to leave that place, the only thing he can do is fight that true terror head-on. And throughout all this time, the Lord has countless opportunities to eliminate him, but deliberately avoids his vital points with every attack, merely knocking him down with ease again and again. The Lord asks whether the protagonist still intends to fight. Si-chun does not fully understand what is happening, but it seems that the monster wants him to submit. The Lord says that the protagonist should reconsider the choice he offered him at the beginning, asking whether he will remain there and guard that magic tower together with him, because this is an extremely rare opportunity. Si-chun refuses, saying that no matter what happens, he will not remain in that damned place. But before he can even finish his sentence, one of his arms is severed, and the Lord asks whether the protagonist truly believes he will not be killed if he continues like this. Until now, the Lord has been patient because the protagonist is the only one who managed to reach that place. So, as a sign of respect, he will ask one final time. The monster's aura begins increasing uncontrollably. The monster says that the protagonist must either stay or be crushed into paste. Si-chun knows what needs to be done, but he refuses to submit because his main objective is more important than his own life. He charges forward, saying that his choice is to fight until the very end and kill anyone who stands against his will. The Lord finds that ridiculous and sends all the stones flying toward the protagonist, but he moves with astonishing speed and overwhelming dexterity. Every movement is calculated. He manages to get close enough to attack the Lord. Through the fights they have had over the past few moments, he managed to notice that before every sword strike, that monster has a delay of 0.4 seconds. He can use that time to observe the angle of force in his opponent's wrist. That way, he can predict the trajectory and evade the blade. Most importantly, after each strike, his opponent has a recovery pause of 0.2 seconds, and if he can find an opening, he can attack him while he is defenseless. No matter how powerful his opponent is or how overwhelming the power he possesses may be, combat experience is the only thing that will determine the winner and loser in a direct confrontation. With his electric blade, He manages to pierce that monster's heart in a single instant. Although it is impossible for a D rank to kill an S rank, the paralysis effect, when used with his full strength, can restrain him for at least a few seconds. His speed is far too high, which is why Shichin has never had enough time to create any distance, so gaining those few seconds now is enough for him to escape, and throughout the entire time he spent inside that place, he kept observing his surroundings. There is a source of light somewhere within that place, but as soon as he manages to approach it, the source of light simply disappears right in front of him. The Lord appears directly behind him, saying that it is a great pity, because what he had been pursuing, believing it to be an exit, was nothing more than an illusion the Lord had left behind. The exit he is desperately searching for does not exist, because this is a demonic den. However, he has to admit that Shichin managing to find an opening in his attack in such a short amount of time is truly interesting. Even under such desperate pressure, he managed to analyze everything calmly and fight with his own life on the line, finding a thread of hope. That means the protagonist truly is worthy of being considered someone capable of bringing hope. The Lord is Purgatory Rakshasa and S-rank warrior. Upon seeing the monster's true appearance, the protagonist is almost paralyzed with fear, because he has already seen that appearance on Demon Lord Lan Yu. It was in his previous life during his final battle against Lan Yu. During the fight, Lan Yu switched between several powerful classes, and Shichin clearly remembers that one of them looked exactly like this, meaning that Rakshasa had been devoured by Lan Yu's power of gluttony, and now the power of gluttony has fused with his body, so perhaps this entire place exists inside his own body. Rakshasa continues praising the protagonist, saying that not only does he have excellent resistance to pressure, but he is also extremely intelligent, so he truly deserves to take everything that exists inside that place. Shichin is slightly confused by this. Rakshasa reveals the SSS class Temporal Rift Key, the only key capable of opening the gate of the Demon Tower. He explains that Demon Lord Lan Yu had devoured countless vicious demons, and the most powerful among them were sealed inside that tower. Therefore, the protagonist must devour all of them and become stronger, turning every one of those demons into part of his own power. After taking the key, Shichin asks why Rakshasa is teaching him all of this and trying to help him in this way. Rakshasa explains that even among demons, there are good and evil ones. The demon lords eliminated his entire clan out of pure selfishness, so he has been waiting for an opportunity to avenge all of his family members, and that man was right from the very beginning. The protagonist is the only hope, and only he can achieve this goal. Shichin asks who that man is. However, all the answers are inside that demon tower and he will have to find them on his own. Rakshasa bows and asks the protagonist to devour him as well, and take his power so that he can avenge all of them. Shichin is surprised by this, but Rakshasa continues saying that from that moment onward the protagonist must become stronger. Open the gate of the demon tower and devour everything inside it. The demons inside will not go easy on him the way Rakshasa did. They are the most cunning and vicious beings in that entire world, but the protagonist must endure everything and defeat every single one of them. He must stand at the very top of the world, and in the end all those demon lords will also be devoured. Only someone like that is worthy of possessing his power. Shichin uses his gluttony ability and devours all of Rakshas's essence, immediately rising to level 10 and obtaining Rakshas's 2 infernal bone swords. The protagonist finally understands everything that is happening and promises to carry Rakshas's will with him. After Rakshasa transforms into a card, his statistics appear. He possesses 100 bones returned to ruin. It absorbs the vitality and strength of the corpses around him, proportionally converting them into his own power. He also possesses 3-phase heavy tribulation. It alters gravity and attacks the opponent in 3 forms, light, heavy, and super heavy. Shichin promises to make all of them pay with their own blood. A short while later he wakes up to his friend shouting at him to hurry up because everyone is already awake. His friends are rushing so they will not be late and they also need to put on their uniforms. The protagonist realizes that he has returned to the dormitory and all the injuries he suffered during his battle have been completely healed. Perhaps all of that was just a dream, but as soon as he opens the system, he realizes that the proof that everything really happened is right there, and the spoils he obtained in the dream also came back with him. He is currently level 10 with all of his stats at 150. In a single night, he managed to rise to level 10, but he still does not know what rank that corresponds to. Zhangzhu tells the protagonist that the night before, someone had been bragging about how much stronger he had become, even saying that he was going to shake the position of the dormitory's number 1, but now they need to leave. That way they will see during the ranking evaluation just how strong he truly became. As they walk, Zhangzhu explains that everyone in their dormitory seems to be classified as E rank. But they cannot forget that each rank is divided into 3 levels, and they are nothing more than lower level E rank. On the other hand, he himself has already reached mid-level E rank. And there is a several-fold difference in strength between each level, so he could take down 10 of them at the same time. And since he has not been tested in the past 2 years, perhaps his strength has increased even further. Ma Long asks Si Chun to use all of his strength and get a D rank result just to scare Zhangzhu to death, so that he can learn his place. As soon as they arrive, Xiang Yu is surprised to see that everyone has arrived so early. The bullies appear once again, causing trouble with several people. Xiang Yu realizes that they are Kong Cheng's lackeys, so it would be better for them to stay away. But the two look ahead, and when they see the protagonist, they become completely terrified and bow before him. Xiang Zhua and Xiang Yu ask why they are showing so much respect to the protagonist, and whether perhaps everything Ma Long said the night before was actually true. Chang Di, a member of the student council, appears in front of the protagonist and says that he heard someone had a conflict with Kong Cheng the day before. He asks whether the protagonist knows that boy is the biological younger brother of the esteemed president of the student council. The protagonist's friends realize that Chang Di is speaking to Si Chun. He is the president's lackey, and the president is D rank. But they do not know why he is getting involved with the protagonist. However, the atmosphere is beginning to feel a little strange. Chang Di approaches, saying that his sense of smell is extremely sharp, and that he can smell who is truly strong. But all he can smell from the protagonist is that he is going to be a failure for the rest of his life. Si Chun asks if he is some kind of dog. Chang Di becomes extremely irritated by that, but the president of the student council approaches and tells him to stop because he has already investigated the situation, and his younger brother was in the wrong from the very beginning. So it is only fair that he pays the price when he gets himself involved in a problem like that. The two stare at each other for a while, and the ranking test begins. Gong Yan tells his little lap dog to hurry up because they need to prepare. However, he believes that the protagonist does not seem to be a threat. Meanwhile, on top of one of the buildings, Ling Yu and another man are watching. The man asks why she suddenly felt like watching the ranking test and whether she perhaps found someone worth observing. She thinks that this test might be quite interesting. 1 hour later, one of the protagonist's friends is tested. The ranking test must be performed individually inside a special demonic den. Inside that place, there is a demonic heart capable of absorbing energy. The awakened must release all of their energy in front of the demonic heart. That way, it can absorb the energy and transmit what it collects to the external equipment through several cables. And finally, the energy is displayed on the screen in the form of data. Chang Zhua achieves a mid-level E rank classification. In addition to the current ranking, that test can also measure another value, potential. It represents the highest rank that a class can reach in the future. People with high potential have a great chance of receiving special attention from the government. Chang Zhua has C rank potential. He's not very happy about that because his ranking has not changed since he arrived. His friends try to comfort him because he is not the only one who failed to reach D rank. In fact, there are not that many D ranks in that school. The next person tested achieves D rank with B rank potential. Chang Di also achieves the same rank with a maximum potential of a rank. The group becomes discouraged because that is already the 8th D rank to appear. Even the examiners are impressed that so many talents of that rank have appeared that year. Although all of them are lower-level D ranks, it is still rare for students without real combat experience. And the normal average is only 1 or 2 students reaching this rank by the time they graduate. The next person to be tested is the president of the student council. Everyone simply watches to see what ranking he will achieve. As soon as he enters the den, he thinks that he will only reveal the full impact of his strength during the practical graduation exam. So for now, he needs to hold back a little and not show everything. Even so, he will still be number 1 in the history of that school. As soon as the data appears, his current level is upper D rank with S rank potential. Everyone is surprised to see that he truly is the number 1 student in that school. Even the examiners are impressed, confirming that he really does possess S rank potential and that they may need to notify their superiors immediately. An awakened with S rank potential is a rare treasure in the world. He will certainly receive special attention and protection from the government, especially since he is the noble young master of the Imperial Guild. This will definitely become national news. Back on the building, the same man from before remarks that this year's test is full of talented students. He thinks Ling Yu already knew that the president of the student council had S-rank potential and that this is why she came there to watch him. That man is Yuan Long, the dean of the National University of the Awakened. Ling Yu says that she is not there because of that guy. Compared to the president of the student council, she is far more eager to see that boy's performance, and he happens to be the next one to be tested. Before the protagonist goes up to take the test, Changdi provokes him again, telling him to try to bring some honor to his dormitory. But when he comes out, he needs to be careful that the result is not another lower-level E rank. That way, all of them will be together in one place as the biggest joke in the university. A bunch of weaklings like them are participating in that test only to embarrass themselves in front of everyone. Ma Long points out that the protagonist will definitely open everyone's eyes. As soon as he enters to take the test, the demonic heart is already surprised and slightly frightened. In that era, for an awakened to have the best development prospects, there is nothing better than joining a high-level guild, and the only opportunity for most people to show their strength to those guilds is the practical graduation evaluation. In this evaluation, teams of up to 10 people are allowed and candidates can freely choose their own members. Every member of the team that finishes in first place will be recruited directly by the Imperial Guild, the best guild in the entire country. Therefore, besides determining each person's ranking, this test serves an even more important purpose. Meanwhile, Changdi is introducing Yen Lin to his boss, saying that his classification is lower D rank. With that, their 10-person team will be complete. The 9D rank students from that class are all on the same team, and together with the president, their team will definitely finish first in the practical evaluation. This means that the test also provides an opportunity to choose the best teammates for the practical graduation evaluation. In this kind of environment, it is inevitable that the strongest teams and the weakest teams will emerge. The strong join together while the weak are excluded and eliminated. This is the immutable law of biological survival. Ma Long is starting to become worried because the protagonist has been inside for a long time, but no sound has been made yet. Because of that, people begin mocking the situation, saying that he must be so weak that his power cannot even be measured. Changdi takes advantage of the situation and tells the president that everyone left there is definitely just trash, so they do not need to keep waiting, and, in any case, their team is already complete. Therefore, they could go somewhere to celebrate. Gong Yen tells him to call the other team members as well. However, at that moment, the protagonist's level appears, revealing that he is upper D rank. Everyone is impressed by that, but the machine says that the current ranking test result may be incorrect because the program has detected that the demonic heart is unstable. Therefore, the test result may contain deviations and he needs to perform the test again. Si Chun had used only his ordinary body without switching classes, and apparently his level 10 is equivalent to upper D rank. He switches classes to the Funeral Flame King to test himself with his weakest class. The result changes, rising to mid-level C rank. People cannot believe it, asking what is happening because his ranking has increased again. Changdi thinks that something is definitely wrong. Even the evaluators question why his ranking changed again because they have never seen a situation like that before. However, once again, the test result detects some kind of error and asks him to test again. The demonic heart is completely terrified by the sheer amount of power in front of it. Si Chun thinks that his other two classes are probably above that ranking. He switches to Rakshasa to test his strongest power. Upon seeing that, the demonic heart panics. The weather outside begins to change like a natural phenomenon. The system starts malfunctioning, and his maximum potential changes to S rank. But at that moment, the system begins issuing a warning, saying that an error is occurring. 2 more S letters appear in front, stating that it is impossible to detect the potential value because the system's maximum load has been exceeded. No one can believe what they are seeing.
Suddenly, a massive explosion occur.
And the workers become worried because the demonic heart has overloaded and they need to enter immediately. Otherwise, that student may end up getting hurt. But as soon as they enter, they realize that the protagonist is perfectly calm and the demonic heart is dead. Si-chun thinks that he accidentally used too much strength and blew up the demonic heart, but he receives a very pleasant surprise. He managed to devour the black heart. The level of everyone in front of him appears, and just as he had predicted, Gong Yen was also hiding his true strength because he is actually mid-level C rank. The examiners explain that unfortunately, the demonic heart has been completely exhausted and suffered a sudden breakdown, so the test will have to be temporarily suspended. And the protagonist's test data from just now was probably incorrect. However, they will report the matter to their superiors for verification. The students who have not yet taken the test can return the next day so that new equipment can be prepared. His group celebrates, saying that the test results were probably not wrong because that boy is definitely a genius. Chang Di walks up to him again and starts shouting, saying that he already knew it was an error because a failure like him could never have S-rank potential. Not to mention that he destroyed the demonic heart and now wants to leave, which is extremely irresponsible. Because of him, the rest of the student council brothers will only be able to take the test tomorrow, so he needs to compensate them for the time they lost. Si-chun begins to lose his patience because that guy never shuts up for even a single moment, and if he does not stop talking right now, he will stop talking forever. Gong Yen intervenes before the worst can happen, telling his subordinate to be quiet immediately and not be so hostile towards their teammate. Chang Di is surprised by the mention of a teammate. The president of the student council invites the protagonist to join their team, because that way they could participate in the practical graduation evaluation together, and the highest score in the school's history would definitely belong to them. Everyone is surprised by the proposal, even his little lapdog, because if the protagonist joins the team, someone will have to be removed, and how is he supposed to explain that to his brothers? Joining Gong Yan's team means practically guaranteeing the first-place prize in the graduation evaluation, and many people cannot get in even by offering bribes. So why was that guy chosen? However, since the president himself personally invited him, Chang Di cannot disrespect him. Even against his own will, he places a hand on the protagonist's shoulder and welcomes him to the group. Si-chun pushes his hand away, saying that he is not interested. The two are surprised by his answer, and just as expected, Chang Di throws another tantrum, shouting at the protagonist and asking what he is talking about, because the strength of that team is number one in the entire school. However, the protagonist does not care about any of that. Already irritated by all the commotion, he looks at Chang Di and says that he is far too noisy, so he had better be careful not to annoy him from now on. All the other students are impressed to see that the protagonist rejected such a great offer, which means that he probably wants to take first place on his own. Gong Yen thinks there is no problem with that since the protagonist wants to do things according to his own ideas. Yuan Long thinks it is a great pity because if the two of them were on the same team, they would definitely set a new historical record for the school. Ling Yu thinks things have become even more interesting because the president of the student council was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and being rejected like that is essentially an open declaration of war against him, not to mention that he is not exactly someone easy to deal with.
Chiang di continue sraging,
saying that the test result was definitely an error and that the protagonist is not actually at that level. However, the president asks what happens if the test is truly correct. Even if there is only a 1 in 100 million chance, he cannot allow anyone to steal his first place. Chang Di has secretly fought inside demonic dens several times, so they could go after the protagonist and teach him a lesson. Gong Yen asks whether his subordinate really thinks he is petty enough to do something like that. Besides, he is no longer in the mood to celebrate, so all the team members can do whatever they want, because whatever they choose to do is none of his business and has nothing to do with him. Chang Di interprets that exactly the way he wants to. 10 minutes later, one of the bullies is talking to Chang Di and says that the protagonist left the school alone without eating, saying that he was heading home. Chang Di thinks that this is a blessing from the heavens. Outside the school, it will be much easier for them to deal with that boy. While the protagonist walks alone, he remembers that, in his previous life, An elite guild suffered an accident while exploring a demonic den inside the country of Shenghe. Inside the den, they encountered an immensely powerful demon that had never been seen before, called Fury. The elite guild was annihilated, and the demon escaped from the den and descended into the human world. That is all the information he knows so far. In this life, in order to determine the exact location of the den where Fury is as quickly as possible, he has developed a plan, and to begin that plan he needs a large amount of money. He heads to the Mithril Monster Market, owned by the Mithril Guild, because that place will become the largest supply market in the country in the future. The weapons and equipment in the hands of the awakened are crucial factors in determining their strength, and the monster market is an essential stop for buying and selling equipment. Not to mention that this is also the fastest way for him to obtain money immediately. Si-chun throws the fangs he obtained onto the counter. One of the employees asks if he is only a student and where he obtained those things. The protagonist says that he got them from a monster, but the man does not think much of them because he has never seen that equipment before. The girl beside him notices that they must be drops from an E-rank cloud-type magical beast called the Funeral Flame. According to the records, a funeral flame fang can be used to make an E-rank cloud scepter or ground into powder. The other man tosses it onto the table, saying that there is no need to give him a lecture because that equipment is low level and therefore has no potential. He points out that the market operates based on VIPs, and the people who frequent that place are awakened with status and position. Everything that passes through his hands is high-quality merchandise. D-rank and above is normal for him, so it is also normal that he does not recognize such inferior things. He continues looking at the protagonist and thinks that he has not had many high-level clients lately, and if things continue at this rate, he will never become a supervisor. On top of that, he has terrible luck because he keeps running into troublesome people who bring him no profit at all, so it is better to dump all of this on the new girl. He asks the rookie to handle the rest of the process and assist the protagonist. After purchasing the materials, she hands him the money, tells him to keep it safe, and asks whether he needs any further assistance. He managed to obtain 18,000, and that is already enough to pay the overdue rent. Even so, he still needs much more money. He takes out his sword and asks her to take a look at that piece of equipment for him. The rookie is amazed when she sees the magnificent giant sword. Although she has never seen anything like it before, she feels that it is at least B rank and could even reach A rank. However, the other employee says that she is imagining things because the market price of an A rank weapon has already reached 1 million, and he has worked there for years without ever seeing even one. Their boss appears and says that he is right. That is not B rank or A rank equipment. The employee takes it as a compliment and says that his boss has a very good eye and that he already knew a poor student like that could not possibly have anything valuable. The boss says that it is clearly something from the lands of Purgatory, an S-rank piece of equipment. The two are shocked when they hear that. The man grabs the protagonist's hand and welcomes him, calling him a VIP customer. He asks Si-chun to follow him to the VIP room and request anything he wants. But the protagonist was already expecting this, and that man has finally appeared. He is Qingzi, the owner of the Mithril Guild. Inside the VIP room, the guild owner asks how the protagonist plans to handle that equipment. Si-chun asks for 1 million. Qingzi is surprised and asks whether he really wants only 1 million, because he knows that even the market price of A-rank equipment can cause an uproar, while that item is a priceless rarity. Si-chun explains that he wants to use the S-rank equipment as collateral for a loan of 1 million, which he will repay within 1 month at most. Qingzi becomes even more surprised, wondering whether such an idea could truly come from a college student. Apparently, the protagonist is not thinking about selling the equipment but instead intends to use it in the future, possessing maturity beyond his peers while also bringing in such a rarity. There are only 2 explanations for something like that. Either he is a wealthy heir who ran away from home, or he is a hidden super genius who has been concealing his abilities from the beginning. Either way, the background of the boy standing in front of him is far from simple. Si-chun continues explaining his offer, saying that he only needs 1 month, and once the deadline arrives, he will repay the principal amount, while the 10% interest can be paid the following month. Qingzi asks Xiao Li to leave for a moment. As soon as she leaves, the guild owner comments that if he is not mistaken, The school Sichin attends must be the National University of the Awakened, and he is a senior about to graduate. From what he knows, the National University holds a practical graduation evaluation every year. That year's evaluation happens exactly 1 month later, and the prize for first place is precisely 1 million. That cannot possibly be a coincidence since the amount and the date match perfectly with what the protagonist is planning to do. Therefore, he dares to assume that Sichin is already certain that he will take first place. Sichin simply stares at the guild owner without saying a single word. Qingzi points out that even though he may win the prize in 1 month, right now he is in such a hurry to pawn such a valuable item just to obtain a loan. That shows that he truly needs the money immediately, and that reaching this point must be his last resort. In that case, the guild owner can offer him 1,500,000 in cash immediately, with 0% interest for 1 month. The protagonist can consider it a gesture of goodwill from a new friend. Sichin is surprised by the proposal, but the guild owner tells him not to worry because he will keep all of this absolutely confidential. However, if Sichin has any new business deals in the future, he must at least consider their market first, and Qingzi promises to give him the greatest discount possible. Sichin is impressed that, even with so little information, Qingzi managed to deduce his background and intentions, which is extremely clever. Even knowing that he was in a tight spot, instead of taking advantage of him, he offered better terms for a long-term partnership. And that is exactly what one would expect from someone who would eventually turn the mithril market into the largest market in the world. To defeat Fury, he cannot rely solely on his own strength. So first, he needs to find trustworthy partners. After the two agree to the proposal, a magical contract is formed between them, and the money is immediately transferred to the protagonist's account. Qingzi comments that Sichin has pawned his weapon, and it is an excellent one, then asks what he plans to use during the graduation evaluation, because if he needs something, he can borrow it from them. Although they do not currently have anything of S rank, they still possess plenty of high-level equipment, even reaching a rank. The protagonist takes out his other sword and says that there is no need because he has 2 of them. The manager and everyone else are stunned. Qingzi bids farewell to the protagonist, realizing that a true hero has emerged among the younger generation. In addition, as a good boss, he points out that thanks to Shaoli, who managed to retain such a valuable customer, they now have an excellent connection, so she will be promoted to supervisor immediately. Before leaving, the protagonist remembers that there is something he would like to buy. A short while later, he arrives at the bus station, feeling anxious. In his previous life, the lack of money tormented him and his family for a long time. Back then, he had just graduated, had not awakened, and no guild would accept him. He worked himself to exhaustion doing odd jobs everywhere just to pay the rent. Because of that, he and his sister could only live a miserable life. After paying the rent, they would be left without money once again. His understanding sister always tried to cheer him up in every possible way, even taking on small jobs such as tutoring students at school. At the time, his sister had been accepted into the Central International Institute of Arts. But even after being accepted, she tore up the admission letter because it was too far away. And at that moment, all she wanted was to stay close to her brother. Afraid of becoming a burden on the family, his sister even gave up on the college of her dreams. But this time, everything will be different. Worried, the protagonist keeps looking around, thinking that it is already getting very late and she should have come out of the platform by now. Suddenly, he hears someone shout his name, saying that she has told him countless times to always wait at the exit, not the entrance. When he sees his sister, his eyes light up and a powerful wave of emotion fills his entire body. It has already been 7 years. Si-yoon asks him to help carry her suitcase, but he does not respond. So she approaches and asks why he is standing there like an idiot, staring at her. Si-chun grabs his sister and holds her tightly. It has been 7 years since he lost her for the first time, but he has finally managed to see her again. Si-yoon shouts at him to let her go because he is squeezing her so hard that he is almost crushing her. She throws the suitcase at him and tells him to carry it, saying that he has been acting strangely over the past few days and asking if some girl rejected him. But the protagonist explains that it is nothing like that. She decides to change the subject and asks him to hurry back home with her. As they walk, she tells him about everything that happened on her way back. Wearing a wide, genuine smile filled with pure happiness. The protagonist smiles as well and promises himself that he will never allow her to suffer again. Meanwhile, a little farther ahead, Zhang and his group are waiting in ambush because this is the road the protagonist takes to get home. He tells everyone to stay hidden, and as soon as that boy appears, they need to grab him. That way, he will personally experience the consequences of provoking someone stronger than himself. One of them becomes slightly worried because so many members of the student council are there, and if they go too far, the protagonist might not survive. Zhang Di explains that he originally intended to teach him only a small lesson, but that Brat's arrogant and irritating attitude has gone too far. A loser, a piece of lower E-rank trash, acting as if he were C-rank and provoking others. That is why they need to beat him until he can barely breathe. That way, he will not be able to participate in the graduation evaluation taking place in 2 weeks. Since Zhang Di is one of the best cloud assassins in the entire school, that Brat only needs to wait and learn his lesson. Meanwhile, the protagonist's sister says that he has been acting very strangely over the past few days and asks whether it is because of the pressure from the graduation evaluation because someone as straightforward as her brother would hardly be having romantic problems. She asks him to cheer up a little because he was the one who once said that life is very long so opportunities will come sooner or later. She begins singing a song to try to cheer him up, but the protagonist is happy to see that his sister really is very smart. She noticed that he was acting a little differently as soon as they met because she still does not know that he awakened and probably thinks that they are still living the same difficult life as before. He tries to reassure her by saying that he is fine, but his sister thinks that he is still being as stubborn as always, perhaps because of male pride. She knows very well that men begin building their own walls once they reach a certain age, which means that her brother is getting a little older. While the two are walking, one of the student council members asks his boss where that girl came from, but Zhang Di, thinking everything is fine, asks if this is not actually perfect because that alley has no cameras. The brothers are going to have a great time this time. Si-chun senses an aura around him, and when he looks back, he sees the student council members. This immediately infuriates him when he realizes that those idiots actually had the courage to appear near his sister. He puts a pair of earphones on her and says that there is a song he has been enjoying a lot lately and wants her to listen to it. She is surprised and asks since when he cares about music, but she agrees because songs can convey a person's feelings. That way, she can understand her brother a little better. With that taken care of, the protagonist looks back and stares at all the idiots in front of him. While his sister listens carefully to the song, the battle begins. However, the protagonist remembers that in the year 2160 of his previous life, he lost his last remaining family member. It was only in 2167, when he was reborn and returned, that he finally saw his sister again, and during his first reunion with his family in 7 years, that group of insects actually tried to ruin everything. He begins beating every one of them without hesitating for even a single second, as if he truly intends to kill them. Every student in front of him is crushed by absolute strength without even managing to land a single blow on the protagonist. Changdi finally realizes that he is far below the protagonist's level and tries to understand how that brat can possibly be so strong. The protagonist continues destroying every opponent until he reaches the last one. Still confident, Changdi shouts that he is an elite assassin, so the protagonist has absolutely no chance against him. Si-chun caves his face in with a punch and continues beating him without stopping. Changdi is close to losing consciousness, yet he still sees a true demon standing in front of him. The protagonist points out that he already warned him not to bother him anymore and with a cold gaze, asks whether he is incapable of understanding human language. Changdi realizes that all of his ribs are broken and that he cannot feel his legs, which means that the test result was real and the protagonist is definitely not a D-rank person. He tries to apologize, but Si-chun no longer cares about anything and orders him to shut up immediately, because if he makes even a single sound, he will be dead before he can blink. Changdi realizes that the protagonist's gaze is not lying, and that he truly has the courage to take a life. However, he cannot understand how a mere student can possess such overwhelming bloodlust, because not even someone who had lived an utterly miserable life should have such powerful killing intent. Si-chun says that every word he says now needs to be engraved into Changdi's mind, because he does not care how that piece of trash chooses to rot. But they must never cross his path again. and if they dare threaten his sister's safety or even appear within her field of vision, then he will eliminate their entire family and make that filthy bloodline disappear completely from the planet without hesitating for even a single second. Changdi can barely remain conscious and simply cries, nodding to show that he understands. The protagonist releases them and runs back to his sister, who is still listening to the song, trying to understand a little more about her brother. By the end of the song, she begins to cry, wondering why that song is making her feel like crying. She thinks that she has not seen her brother for only a few days, but the way the song makes her feel, it seems as though a great deal has happened. The song makes it seem as though her brother has been very lonely because she's not always by his side. With tears in her eyes, she pulls off the earphones and looks back, telling him that she hates it when he does that kind of thing. However, everything had already been resolved and the protagonist has a gift for her, hiding one of his hands behind his back. Si-Yuan is amazed when she sees that it is a holographic drawing pen, the latest model from the Drago group. She points out that it costs tens of thousands and asks where he got the money for all of this. Even though she loves the gift, she says that he should return it right away, claiming that she did not even want that pen that badly. But the truth is that she is simply worried about her brother's financial situation. Si-Yuan thinks that, in his previous life, he failed to protect her and could not even protect the dreams she had for her own life. With his hand completely injured, he promises himself that, in this life, he will protect everything that rightfully belongs to her. A short while later inside their home, she is playing with her new pen and sees that it works extremely well since she can draw holograms in the air. Meanwhile, the protagonist is enjoying the noodles made by his sister, thinking that they are the best in the world. However, all of her happiness disappears because they still need to pay the rent while he is spending so much money on things like that. Si-Yuan tells her that he has already paid the rent for the entire year, leaving his sister somewhat surprised. However, he still does not want to tell her how he obtained so much money. So, he makes up a story saying that he did some business with a friend and managed to earn a good amount of money. But she already knows that her brother is terrible at lying, so this is extremely suspicious. Now he is keeping secrets from her, but it has been a very long time since she last saw such a sincere smile on his face. Because of that, she decides to simply accept the excuse and asks him not to push himself too hard, no matter what happens. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Ling Yu tells the president of the student council that this time, his little pet dog has been seriously injured. His body has suffered comminuted fractures. Gong Yan thinks that not even the best treatment will allow him to recover within a month, and he did not expect that idiot to actually go after the protagonist and end up in such a condition. Ling Yu thinks that he will miss the graduation evaluation, but the president believes that it makes no difference because his team has only lost a useless deadweight with no ability. Gong Xian appears, saying that the protagonist is causing trouble again. He is the director of the employment office at the National University of the Awakened. He points out that he has confirmed the internal results of the latest ranking test, and the protagonist truly is C rank. He is also the only person in the university with a rank higher than Gong Yan's. He points out that Gong Yan's father invited the president of the alliance to watch his graduation performance, so they cannot allow anyone to steal the spotlight, and if there is no other choice, he will have to ask his niece to fill the vacant spot on the team. Gong Yan thinks that his uncle is worrying too much and asks whether they really believe he used all of his strength during the test. Therefore, they can rest assured because on the day of the practical evaluation, he will show everyone who is truly the strongest. A little later, at 11 o'clock at night, inside the men's dormitory of the National University, the protagonist is taking a shower because his training with a 100-kilogram load for the day has already been completed. In addition, the money problem has already been solved, and everything is progressing extremely well. He should be able to begin his official plan after graduating. However, his next mission is to secure the 1 million scholarship prize from the championship during the graduation evaluation and repay the loan he took out. Since this contract must be fulfilled, he will need that man's help again in the future. And with less than a month remaining before the graduation evaluation, he needs to gain a few more levels as quickly as possible. When he falls asleep, he enters the gluttony system once again and heads toward the tower. The test results show that even his weakest class can still reach C rank, but his strongest class could not be successfully measured. Although Rakshasa is S rank, He is still unable to use its full power at the moment, and the amount of strength he can actually wield remains unknown. Because of that, the rankings of his other two classes are still unclear to him. However, he is going to test that today, and even though he does not know how well he will perform inside the Demon Tower, he still needs to face it. But as soon as he crosses through, he is surprised by what he sees on the falling star plane. 1 second later, an absurd pressure begins pulling him downward. The protagonist realizes that the gravity there is vastly stronger. The gravity on the surface of that falling star is approximately 10 g, while Earth's gravity is only 1 g. In addition, the door he entered through has completely disappeared, which means that it will only open again once he defeats the boss of that place. However, in that environment, he can barely use 30% of his strength. He needs to adapt as quickly as possible. A B-rank Phantom Lion of the Star Warrior race appears directly in front of him. He switches to Lightning Assassin and begins his battle against his new enemy. However, he has great difficulty moving because his body is now 10 times heavier. Therefore, he needs to finish this as quickly as possible. He manages to strike his opponent but misses the vital point, and the paralysis simply does not work. He is surprised that he missed his attack. The gravity has probably affected his speed and accuracy far too much. As a result, the assassin's advantage has practically disappeared, while his opponent is still able to move with great ease. He begins to be pressured, realizing that the level of the monsters inside that demon tower is truly terrifying. After being bitten, he switches classes to the Purgatory Demon. The protagonist knows perfectly well that every class has its own core advantage, and close-quarters combat requires warriors with high bonuses to strength and vitality. With his newfound strength, he manages to overpower his opponent and slam it onto the ground. That way, he can stack gravity to its limit and concentrate the entire impact into his descent. In an environment where gravity is already insane, that punch carries a 60-fold multiplier. Therefore, there is no way his opponent can stop it. A short while later, he has created a crater in the ground and defeated his opponent. He gains 12,000 experience points, immediately rising to level 11. Each star on a card represents an attribute multiplier. The more stars it has, the greater the increase after switching classes. The Purgatory Demon has more stars, and its overall enhancement is much greater. So, after switching, he should be somewhat stronger than when using Lightning Assassin. Even so, against a B-rank monster, he had to use all of that, which means that none of his classes has yet broken through B-rank strength. However, something very strange is still happening. The system did not display the option to devour the monster after he eliminated it, and the gate leading to the next floor has not appeared either. This means that the final boss probably has not appeared yet. A black hole appears beside him, revealing several more monsters of the same type emerging from it. The monsters begin attacking him simultaneously, and only now does the protagonist understand what the Purgatory Demon meant. When the door opens, what awaits him will be endless pain, but he must endure all of it. The protagonist wakes up frightened in the middle of the night because the sensation of his muscles being torn apart, his skin separating from his bones, and the pain in his dreams all felt incredibly real. But this makes one thing extremely clear to him. There are no shortcuts to becoming stronger. This lonely path through purgatory is only beginning. On Friday, inside the auditorium of the National University, everyone is gathered together. Some people are discussing how high-ranking members of the Guild Alliance will be watching that year's practical evaluation, and that explains why the rules have changed. In previous years, there was no minimum number of members and no ranking requirement, but now each team needs to have at least 5 members and at least 1 upper-level E rank. Perhaps they changed the rules to make everything more interesting. One of the people at the front begins explaining that the ranking information for each student has already been sent to their wristbands. Therefore, they should check their wristbands and form a team as quickly as possible. However, the protagonist's friend notices that something is wrong, seeing that his level is listed as lower E rank. People are somewhat surprised by this because he had achieved a higher result during the evaluation test. However, all of this is part of a plan they had prepared. This way, no one will want to form a team with him, and the graduation evaluation is far too important, so nobody will want to put dead weight on their team. And because he rejected the student council president's invitation back then, He must be bitterly regretting it now. But all of this was arranged by Gong Yan's uncle because his nephew is useless and will never learn how to use power and human nature to his advantage. So as his uncle, he should teach him. This way, his opponent will not even have the qualifications to compete. He asks the students to hurry as much as possible so they can form their teams. Everyone goes over to the president to try to join his team. Kong Chang tells them to be quiet and step back because he only has room for one more person at most. Half an hour later, several people have already formed teams, but the protagonist and his 3 friends still do not have enough members. They complain because they have already gone everywhere, and no one wants to form a team with them. And at this rate, they might not even be able to participate in the practical graduation evaluation. However, they find the whole situation far too strange. How could the protagonist's performance have been evaluated as the lowest? Registration requires at least 5 people, and at least one member must be lower-level E rank. This means that someone is deliberately targeting their dormitory. The protagonist knows very well that the practical evaluation is everyone's only real chance to stand out. Only by joining a team with a high score can someone secure good opportunities afterward. In the final evaluation, the number of monsters inside the demonic den depends on the size of the team, so simply adding more people does not solve everything. Therefore, even if they cannot join a strong team like the student council presidents, no one wants to associate with people at the lowest level. And with 3 lower-level members on the same team, they are basically doomed. Suddenly, someone approaches Jiang Zhua and tells him that they only need one more person to complete their team. The protagonist realizes that if this continues, the 3 people with the lowest levels will probably be abandoned by everyone, and in the end, losing the qualification to compete is something he will not allow to happen. Jiang Zhua surprises everyone by apologizing but rejecting the other boys' invitation, because those from the same dormitory had already decided to form a team together, and he will not abandon his roommates. The other boys simply leave because they had only invited Jiang Zhua to complete their team, and if he still wants to refuse, then it does not matter. Ma Long looks at his wristband and realizes that almost everyone has already completed their team. Si Chun looks at the director and notices that he has the same surname as the president of the student council, and only one person has yet to appear. That means he is also a member of the Gong family, changing such an important evaluation rule on a whim and even falsifying his real ranking just to prevent him from forming a team. The director probably sees the protagonist as a threat to his family, and apparently those with power can do whatever they want. But if he does nothing, he will not be able to participate in that evaluation. He switches to Lightning Assassin, and since everyone is underestimating him so openly, there is no reason for him to be polite to anyone. There is more than one way to prove strength besides that evaluation. As he releases his power, he attracts everyone's attention. His friends also become worried and ask what he is doing. However, the protagonist continues walking toward the director. He thinks that awakened schools have always maintained a special tradition to help students master their classes and combat skills. In any environment, they can initiate a one-on-one challenge. It is an extremely provocative act, but also the most direct way to display strength in front of everyone. Faced with a challenge like that, many people would back down, but Gong Yan obviously will not retreat, so if he can humiliate the student council president, he will destroy his family's prestige and force all of them to stop this nonsense. But before he can do that, the last person opens the door and calls his name, asking whether his team is still incomplete. She says that she would also like to participate in that year's practical graduation evaluation, and since she had already reached D rank back in middle school, joining his team should not be a problem. His roommates are stunned, trying to figure out where and when the 2 of them became so close. Kong Chang becomes furious and asks what his cousin is talking about. Even the director cannot believe what he has just seen, but she simply continues walking toward the protagonist. The other students begin commenting that she is the vice president of the student council and ask why she would want to join the team of those guys when she is an exchange student. Gong Xian becomes irritated, trying to understand why she is helping someone she does not even know. However, he tells her that since she is an exchange student, technically she is not qualified to participate in the evaluation. In addition, she has never taken a ranking test since transferring, so there is no report proving her current rank. Her participation would violate the rules. Yuan Long appears beside everyone and says that director Gong Xian is right about that. Gong Xian becomes worried, trying to understand why the other director has appeared there as well. Yuan Long continues by telling Ling Yu that she is only there for a temporary exchange. So why does she want to get so involved in all of this? However, what shocks the protagonist the most is that the director's class should be warrior. So when did he obtain a teleportation ability? Yuan Long thinks that if she participates, it will undermine fairness, because the evaluation only has meaning when true strength is displayed. Ling Yu thinks that is a great pity. The protagonist tries to see the rankings of the two directors, but his ability gives him no response at all. Gong Xian thinks that the director is on his side and agrees with him, saying that their school has always maintained its prestige by following the rules. Yuan Long points out that the purpose of the National University is to cultivate high-level awakened and provide them with the best possible stage, ensuring a constant flow of talent into the world. Because of that, the practical evaluation has been a tradition for decades and one of the greatest turning points in a student's life. So if someone loses that opportunity for strange reasons, how could the school possibly bear responsibility for it? Gong Xian begins trembling in fear, thinking that the old man is trying to expose him in front of everyone. He had already pulled a few strings behind the scenes, but the head director had never cared about those small matters before. So the only plausible reason for the two of them to put on this entire show is because of that brat. Even against his own wishes, he decides to lower his guard a little, because it is not worth confronting the old man right now. He then wishes his nephew good luck, since he could only help him this far. The strong students have already formed teams, and only the protagonist is left carrying 3 pieces of trash, so his nephew should be able to win easily this time. And in an attempt to cover up his mistake, he stands up and apologizes to the director, saying that he is absolutely right and that this was a failure by the career placement office because they failed to notice that the current format could leave someone excluded. Therefore, he announces to everyone that teams with fewer than 5 members, or even teams without a lower-level E-rank member, will also be allowed to register. The graduation evaluation will be open to everyone. With that, the 4 of them are able to form their team and appoint the protagonist as captain. Standing a little farther away from everyone, Yuan Long thinks that Ling Yu's interest in the protagonist is greater than he had imagined. On one side is the strongest team in the academy's history, led by Gong Yan. On the other is Si Chun and his 3 roommates who have the lowest levels in history. This makes the director extremely curious to know which demonic den they will choose and what score they will be able to achieve. Once all the teams are formed, the captains are allowed to select their demonic den. But before the announcement even finishes, someone has already submitted a choice. All the students are shocked when they see that the protagonist has already chosen. Even his own teammates think he has completely lost his mind, asking him to cancel it and whether he has any idea what he just selected. The practical graduation evaluation is the first time the students enter a real demonic den as a team. Inside, credits are earned by defeating lords and ordinary monsters. They receive 10 points if they eliminate every monster in the demonic den. For every monster left alive, 1 point is deducted. Successfully defeating the boss grants 20 points, but if they fail, they receive absolutely nothing. Completion time also matters greatly. If they finish everything within 1 hour, they can earn 20 points. After that, 1 point is deducted every 5 minutes. Each demonic den rank has a different difficulty level, and the score multiplier changes accordingly. An F-rank den has a multiplier of 1.5, with a maximum score of 75. An E-rank den has a 2 times multiplier, with the maximum score reaching 100. So if they choose an F-rank demonic den, the highest score they could possibly achieve is 75 points. An E-rank demonic den, on the other hand, can theoretically reach 100 points. 10 points for eliminating all the monsters, 20 points for defeating the boss, and another 20 points for finishing everything within 1 hour multiplied by 2. That would result in a total of 100 points. The team with the highest score will receive offers from the Imperial Guild, and the team MVP, chosen through a vote by the team members combined with the teachers' evaluations, will also directly receive a management position in the Imperial Guild, along with a prize of 1 million. The highest score in the history of that school is 90 points, achieved years ago when the genius of that academy, now the leader of the Emperor Squad, graduated. The difficulty of an E-rank demonic den was already truly high and required at least 3D rank awakened just to have a chance of completing it, and perhaps the student council president's group would be able to challenge the school's record. Returning to the moment when the protagonist chose the den he wanted to face, as soon as the examiners and students saw it, they could not believe their eyes. He had chosen a D-rank difficulty demonic den. They could not believe it because in the history of that academy, no graduate had ever completed a den of that level. Just by choosing that difficulty, every member of his team had already fallen into complete panic, thinking that the protagonist had lost his mind. Ma Long keeps asking whether the protagonist truly thought it through before choosing, and he confirms that he did. But at that moment, the president of the student council also chooses the same difficulty, and his team confirms without hesitation. Everyone becomes excited when they see that, because the competition between the two is truly going to be very interesting. A woman from the other group looks down on the protagonist and his companions, telling them to stop acting like big shots because they are nothing but useless weaklings and should first take a look at their own strength. But apparently, since they know they are at the bottom, they are only trying to attract attention. Another person says that since the difficulty is so high, his teammates probably will not agree to it. While there is still time to give up, they will probably switch teams. Ma Long looks at the protagonist and notices that his expression is determined, not to mention the heavy aura coming from his gaze. Throughout college, the protagonist had always been the one who needed the protection of his companions. But now, he is a new man trying to lead all of them toward glory. Ma Long decides to accept because they have spent 4 years together, and he will stand by his companion until the end. Xiang Yu agrees as well because they have been at the bottom their entire lives, so it is time to stop thinking that way. Xiang Zhua argues with the other two, because he is clearly the boss of that dormitory, yet he is the last one to accept. However, since he has no other choice, he agrees as well, saying that they will graduate no matter what it takes. Si Chun apologizes to his companions because he chose that difficulty because he wants to become the MVP. But now, all of them will have to risk their lives because of him. However, they can achieve the highest score together without the slightest difficulty. Gong Yan becomes furious when he hears that and shouts that the MVP title belongs only to him, because there can only be one strongest person in that entire school. Ling Yu is surprised, because this is the first time she has ever seen that expression on the student council president's face, and the rivalry between the two has finally come out of the shadows. The director thinks that youth truly has no fear of the unknown. Ling Yu is focused on something else, because choosing a difficulty like that shows an enormous amount of confidence from the protagonist. Even if he is C rank, it is impossible to carry an entire team through a level as difficult as that. Although a D-rank den has a 3 times multiplier and can theoretically reach 150 points, the difficulty is several times greater than an E-rank den. With the current strength of those teams, that choice is clearly not the most sensible one. The director agrees because there is only half a month left before the evaluation begins, and in that amount of time it is impossible to achieve any real growth. Therefore, the most they can do is hope that when the time comes, at least the protagonist and his team will perform somewhat well. There are 17 days left until the evaluation begins, and the protagonist is making his entire team train like lunatics. Ma Long asks why they spend the entire day doing that when everyone else is in classrooms training elemental power and monster simulations. They are playing dodgeball, doing shuttle runs, and sprinting, so why are they doing all of that? Si Chun points out that at this point, no matter how much they train their elemental power or practice virtual combat, all of it is useless. In the end, it is all controlled practice. When they enter an unknown demonic den and come face to face with a monster they have never seen before, when fear and the unknown come crashing down on them like a flood, what will determine whether they live or die will not be memorized theories or improvised combat tactics. It will be pure instinct. The stamina, explosiveness, and reaction speed they are training now are all meant to sharpen the instincts of each person's body. The school's simulations help very little. What truly makes a difference is facing a real demonic den. However, ordinary people like them do not have access to real training dens. Those who have always possessed that advantage and privilege are the ones who are anything but ordinary. They do everything they can to widen the gap between themselves and outsiders even further, just so they can remain at the top forever. From the moment they are born, they already have things that others could spend their entire lives chasing and never reach. His group becomes worried and asks what they can possibly do, since they have absolutely nothing. Si-chun says that they need to enter the Imperial Guild with the highest score and leap over the class barriers standing right in front of them. The graduation evaluation is their only chance to surpass everything and everyone, and also their best chance to surpass those privileged people. So he will do everything he can to fulfill the promise he made to them. They will win, no matter what appears in front of them. Back inside the dreamlike magic tower, on the falling star plane, the protagonist continues fighting those monsters day after day. The same story repeats itself many times. During the day he trains with his companions, and at night he trains alone, until he finally manages to reach level 16 and defeat all the monsters. But there is still one day left before the competition. With his body completely covered in injuries and his face drenched in blood, the protagonist says that the real battle begins now. Finally, on June 17th of the year 2157, on the day of the evaluation, an announcement is broadcast telling everyone that the graduation evaluation is about to begin. A drone introduces itself to them, saying that it will be responsible for accompanying them during the evaluation. Meanwhile, outside in the administrative building, Yuan Long goes to meet Gong Lin, the co-founder of the Imperial Guild and Gong Yan's father. The students are impressed to see that someone as important as him is right there. However, there is still another person inside the car, leaving everyone curious to see who it is, since even the founder of the Imperial Guild and the director personally went to welcome him. As soon as the man steps out, everyone becomes even more impressed. He is Carl Cavendish, the vice president of the World Alliance. The students are so amazed because the Guild Alliance is currently the most powerful organization in the world. If someone is recruited by them or even manages to establish contact with the Guild Alliance, that alone changes everything. Their life immediately rises to another level. Sometime later, already inside the room, Gong Xian explains that there are 184 students participating in the final evaluation, divided into 28 teams. 23 teams chose F-rank demonic dens. 3 teams chose an E-rank demonic den. 2 teams chose D-rank demonic dens. Sigrid, the Secretary General of the Guild Alliance, is surprised and asks whether there are really teams choosing D-rank because those demonic dens are classified as dangerous even for professional guild squads. Because of that, she needs to ask whether they properly explain the risks to the students. Gong Xian points out that they made everything very clear from the beginning. Since the students have almost no real combat experience, most of them are at the lowest level. They can barely deal with ordinary monsters inside F-rank dens. Even so, facing the lords is already difficult for them. A lord's strength is far greater than that of ordinary monsters of the same rank. And to defeat a lord inside an F-rank den, the students need to give everything they have. But inside an E-rank den, the situation changes completely. Every ordinary E-rank monster is as strong as an F-rank lord. For most students, clearing this level is practically an impossible mission. Sigrid asks whether there are any protective measures in place in case a student is placed in danger. Gong Xian tells her not to worry because their students are their most precious assets. Outside every demonic den, armed personnel from the Imperial Guild are monitoring everything. If an extremely dangerous situation is detected, they will intervene immediately. In addition, the wristbands have a teleportation function. As soon as a student gives the command to withdraw, they will be instantly transported outside the den. Sigrid thinks that even so, 2 teams still chose D-rank difficulty. Apparently, that school truly is filled with talented students. So she is eager to see how those 2 teams will perform. But he is also eager to see how many minutes they will manage to endure, because those children will probably come running out before long. Inside the den, the protagonist's team encounters its first problem, the Phantom Bat Monkey. The protagonist identifies them immediately and explains to his group that they specialize in group attacks and that their aerial charges are absurdly fast, so they need to remain alert at all times. As soon as the first wave of attacks comes, the protagonist is the first to identify it and shouts for everyone to pay attention. They all manage to dodge, but they are extremely frightened by what just happened. However, when they look ahead, they realize that the protagonist eliminated 3 monsters by himself in a single instant. The protagonist tells his team that, In their current state, they cannot face those monsters head-on, so they need to stay together and protect each other there, while he handles the rest by himself. While his companions are only trying to stay alive, Jiangzhou finally realizes why the protagonist had been making them train their reaction speed and explosiveness. It was not because he expected them to fight side by side, but simply to make sure they stayed alive. He becomes a little irritated by that because he had always been the boss of the dormitory, and now he is being carried all the way to graduation by that boy who is crushing every monster in front of him. The bat monkeys continue attacking, but none of them can last more than a second in front of the true monster of that den. Jiangzhou remembers when Ma Long said that the protagonist had become extremely strong, and he did not believe it for even a second. But now that he is seeing it with his own eyes, that guy is far too strong to be just a graduate. His actions show that he is someone who has already been through real wars, as if none of this is new or even remotely challenging to him. Jiangzhou cannot accept the situation because, out of nowhere, Si Chun became far too confident, leaving everyone else behind. Another monster attacks the team, but this time, Jiangzhou grabs one of its legs and tells his two companions that they cannot simply become deadweight and leave everything on the protagonist's shoulders. This evaluation is not only for him but for all of them. This awakens the fighting instinct within his companions, and they begin attacking the monsters. However, their strength is completely different. Even so, they combine their attacks and manage to restrain one of the monsters. Jiangzhou takes advantage of the opening and manages to cause a small amount of damage to the monster, realizing that the attack worked, but the monster is still extremely resistant. He attacks several more times. However, the monster continues resisting and gradually manages to break free. Already losing his patience, Jiangzhou uses all of his strength, causing a massive explosion and eliminating the bat monkey. The drone accompanying them congratulates the entire team because the phantom bat monkeys have been successfully eliminated. Si Chun is surprised to see that his team managed to eliminate a monster. Happy, they celebrate, asking whether the protagonist saw it and saying that eliminating that monster was extremely easy for them. The drone announces that all ordinary monsters inside the den have been eliminated. Gong Xian cannot believe how that is possible because those students, who have no real combat experience, managed to kill a D-rank monster above their own level. Gong Lin does not seem very pleased by any of this, but on the other hand, Carl thinks the protagonist performed extremely well, not to mention that he looks a lot like an old acquaintance, and he promises to remember that boy's name. Gong Lin becomes increasingly furious about it. Gong Xian notices this and tries to shift everyone's attention, telling them to look at the other team that chose the same difficulty, since they have already reached the middle section. Secret thinks their coordination is extremely perfect, making them look almost like a professional guild squad. Carl is also very satisfied, seeing that the level of that year's graduates is truly very high, but the real battle has not even begun yet. Inside the student council's den, they are facing miasma mushrooms. The entire team is cooperating to eliminate the monsters and manages to do so with relative ease. The team thinks that the monsters in the school evaluation are exactly the same as the ones they faced during training, so eliminating them has not been difficult at all. However, this was arranged by the Gong family itself. All they have to do is choose the right support, and life becomes ridiculously easier. At this pace, first place is 100% guaranteed. Meanwhile, inside the protagonist's den, they are amazed that they actually managed to reach the top of a D-rank demonic den. They are staring at the phantom monkey, a D-rank cloud warrior. Ma Long asks whether that really is the final boss. Jiangzhou is also somewhat frightened because just one strike from that monster would be enough to eliminate him about 10 times over. But at that moment, the boss looks at them, terrifying everyone, and charges toward the entire group. Without thinking twice, the three begin running, but the protagonist lands a blow and sends the boss flying away. He continues his sequence of attacks and finishes it off within a few seconds. Because of that, the protagonist gains 200 experience points and an ice monkey hide, but he finds it extremely strange. Eliminating a lord from a den of that level gave him very little experience, not to mention that the drop was of extremely low quality. His team notices that there are several crystals inside the tree, and judging by their size, they are at least intermediate magic crystals. And if they can take them out and sell them, they will be set for life. But since the protagonist is already suspicious of everything, he shouts for his team to wait. However, at that moment, an intense light fills the entire area and an explosion of ice engulfs the place, trapping everyone, even the drone. Because of that, the drone loses its signal and the transmission is interrupted. Gong Xian becomes very satisfied because that was exactly what he expected, and all of them took the bait. High-level monsters possess intelligence and trash will always be trash, useful only for dragging others down. Now, their journey in the graduation evaluation has come to an end. Carl asks whether the students' lives are at risk in this situation. Gong Xian says yes, and apparently saving them is now the priority, so there is no other choice but to send in the guild squad to intervene, ending their evaluation. However, the director asked them to give that team a little more time because the wristbands monitor their physical condition in real time. Their vital signs are currently normal, and there is no record of any of them considering giving up. The right to choose must remain in the hands of the examinees themselves. Back inside the den, Ma Long has not been frozen. He was extremely lucky because he also possesses a cloud-type class, so he can withstand the freezing effect to some extent. Otherwise, they would have been wiped out all at once. But at that moment, another monster appears, and that is the true boss of the demonic den. Ma Long is certain that he has seen that monster in the monster encyclopedia before. A cloud-type mage with both control and attack abilities, specializing in manipulating ice and snow. Cunning and treacherous, it loves to cruelly toy with its prey until they die, and it is known as the Icebone Skeleton King. It is currently C rank, and that ice bomb was probably a trap created by it. Since that is a rare high-level monster, there is no way Ma Long can face it alone, so he needs to free the protagonist. However, the den boss strikes one of his legs, preventing him from running. The wristband detects the injury to his left leg and asks whether he would like to withdraw from the evaluation. But the young man refuses, thinking that he needs to thaw out his companions immediately. If the protagonist recovers, they still have a chance to win. But another attack pierces his arm, causing the purification to fail. The den boss continues laughing at the situation, and the wristband keeps warning him that his heart rate is extremely high and that a penetrating wound has been detected in his right arm, asking whether he wants to withdraw from the evaluation. Ma Long, feeling unbearable pain throughout his body, begins asking himself whether he should give up. Whenever he faces difficulties or fear, he always ends up running away. That is why he is always left behind, ignored and even bullied. But this time they risk their lives to get this far, and finally have a real chance to change their fate. Because of that, he will never give up again. Gathering the last of his willpower, he begins purifying the ice to free the protagonist, but the monster attacks him again. Even so, he continues despite knowing that he is going to be hit. At the final second, the protagonist awakens and manages to break free using the god of lightning, saving his friend. Ma Long realizes that, in the end, Si Chun managed to free himself, but the protagonist explains that it was not quite like that because his companion helped him a great deal, then asks whether his injuries are serious. Ma Long thinks that this is not the time to worry about that because the monster is a C-rank, Cloud-type lord, the Icebone Skeleton King. It is extremely powerful, and they cannot allow themselves to be frozen again. While he is explaining this, the Ice King creates a gigantic ice explosion bomb and continues laughing as if it were merely playing with its prey. Ma Long panics when he sees that the monster can create an ice explosion bomb of that size and wonders how they are supposed to dodge it. A massive explosion occurs, and the monster thinks that it has already won, but then realizes that nothing happened to the protagonist or his friend. Si Chun had used the frost physique, which is immune to cold and increases all resistances in low-temperature environments. This frightens the Ice King. Ma Long is also somewhat confused and asks what kind of power exists within his friend because he should be a lightning assassin. But when he realizes that Si Chun is special, known as a dual-class user, he becomes slightly relieved. On the other hand, the protagonist is not relieved at all by the situation. He becomes serious and apologizes because it was his misjudgment that put all three of them in danger, but he promises that it will never happen again. He switches classes once more to the Purgatory Demon to finish everything in a single move. Ma Long becomes even more shocked by the situation. Normally, an awakened can awaken only one class, but there are some extremely rare cases where, with a 1 in 10 million chance, an awakened ends up awakening 2 classes. These incredibly rare existences are known as dual-class users. In the entire world, there are no more than 10 dual-class users. As soon as a talent like that is discovered, they immediately become a recruitment target for every major guild team, and his friend possesses exactly that kind of power, or perhaps something even greater, because he transformed once again using a 3rd class. Not to mention that every one of those classes is terrifyingly powerful. Si-chun raises his strength and vitality to the maximum and leaps toward the king of the den. Ma Long realizes that the monstrous pressure the den boss had been emitting before simply disappears in front of the protagonist's blade. Si-chun manages to eliminate his opponent with a single move. Ma Long thinks that this is exactly what he should have expected from his big brother, because a boss of that level was defeated with just 1 strike. Si-chun says that their other 2 companions are still frozen, and asks Ma Long to free them if he still has enough energy. Ma Long immediately runs over because he had forgotten about the other 2, but the protagonist uses that time to devour the body of the Ice King, obtaining another class. In addition, this is the first time he has devoured a class outside of his dreams, but the camera drone was frozen by the ice explosion, so none of it should have been transmitted to the audience. Not to mention that they still have plenty of time left and will probably be able to obtain a perfect score without much effort. At that moment, the system appears in front of him, saying that his Lightning Assassin class has reached 100%, and that he has received another star as an attribute point to distribute. Meanwhile, at the same time, on Gong Yan's team, his teammates are having tremendous difficulty dealing with the D-rank giant taming flower. Even after using all their strength, Ma Long and his teammates are still frozen by the ice explosion. But the camera drone is still in front of him. Not to mention that they still have plenty of time left and will probably be able to obtain a perfect score without much effort, but the camera drone is still in front of him. Can barely restrain the monster because everyone is already exhausted and cannot hold the beast back much longer. Even so, they manage to endure long enough for the president of the student council to accumulate the necessary amount of power. He charges forward fiercely and eliminates the boss with a single move. The transmission drone congratulates his team for successfully clearing the den with a total completion time of 35 minutes. Everyone begins celebrating because they achieved a perfect score, meaning first place is guaranteed. Outside, Kangxing comments that even inside an F-rank demonic den, which is the lowest level, people normally take around 1 hour to clear everything, and anyone who came out of the den before them was probably just a failure who gave up halfway through. Several students are completely shaken by what they experienced, but right ahead of them is the protagonist's team. Kangxing notices that they came out first and concludes that the great Si Chen's team also managed to get out early. They approach and begin provoking them, asking how someone like him, who could not even finish the evaluation, had been acting so arrogant before. Gong Yan immediately orders his younger brother to step back because the vice president has arrived and they need to go greet him. Carl arrives while applauding, saying that what happened was absolutely incredible and that today he witnessed an astonishing performance. He walks toward them. Kangxing knows that this is a man standing at the top of the world, and he is walking directly toward the 2 of them. Gong Yan raises his hand to greet the vice president, but Carl walks straight past him and goes to the protagonist, saying that it was truly impressive. Clearing a D-rank demonic den in only 21 minutes is something even professional guild squads would have difficulty accomplishing. Kangxing cannot believe that those 4 useless people cleared a D-rank demonic den in only 21 minutes. Si-chun knows that this is Carl, the vice president of the World Guild Alliance and currently considered the 2nd strongest person in the world. However, what the protagonist does not know is what he is doing there. Carl asked whether the protagonist's name is Si-chun, because thanks to him, coming all the way there to watch the evaluation was completely worthwhile. He comments that the young master of the Gong family also performed extremely well by leading a team to clear a demonic den of that level at his age. Apparently, President Gong Lin truly knows how to raise his children. Gong Lin thanks him for his kind words, but that is only a smokescreen because he is actually furious with his son. Carl notices the time and says that it is already very late and that he needs to return to take care of some matters. Before leaving, he tells the school director that he was extremely lucky this time because those two are twin stars that appear only once every 1,000 years. Gong Xian announces that he will reveal the evaluation results of the two teams. Due to both teams achieving perfect scores, he declares them tied for first place and every member will be recruited by the Imperial Guild. They are all thrilled by the news because now their futures are secured immediately after graduation. It is a direct step toward paradise. He continues announcing that in addition to all of that, the captains of both teams will take management positions within the core of the Imperial Guild and split the 1 million MVP prize. However, neither of them is satisfied with that result. The protagonist thinks that he will now receive only 500,000, and that alone is a major problem because he promised Qingji 1 million within a month. Therefore, he needs to find a way to obtain the remaining 500,000 as quickly as possible. Gong Yuan continues insisting that there can only be one first place and, without thinking twice, challenges the protagonist to an additional one-on-one match. Everyone is surprised by this, even the vice president of the Guild Alliance. His uncle walks over to him and asks what he is talking about because the evaluation is already over and tying for first place is already the best possible result. Not to mention that the protagonist probably will not accept an extra fight. Si Chun says that he has only one question. If he wins, the entire 1 million prize has to go to him. Gong Yuan thinks that is perfectly fair and points out that if the protagonist somehow truly wins, he can take whatever he wants. Carl finds this very interesting, which means that the show has not yet come to an end. The university's two stars face each other and the protagonist asks how they are going to settle the situation. A short while later, back at the market, Qingji admits that, at first, he thought the protagonist was only strong enough to take first place, but he never imagined that he would break the record and even achieve a perfect score. Now the news is talking about him everywhere and apparently he really did make the right choice. Therefore, he is willing to forgive the 1,500,000 that the protagonist owes him, asking him to consider it an angel round investment in the protagonist. Si Chun refuses because he needs to repay what he owes and he is there to discuss two things. The first concerns the deadline, asking whether Qingji could give him one more week because, since there was a tie for first place in the graduation evaluation, he received 500,000 less than expected. Because of that, he will have an additional individual match against the other champion, and it will take place inside a wild demonic den outside the school in 1 week. Qingji is shocked that two students are going to enter a wild demonic den outside the school, since neither of them has been trained by a guild team. Therefore, it is far too dangerous. Si Chun thinks that he should not worry too much because once he wins that match in a week, he will obtain the remaining 500,000. Not to mention that he will also hand over the materials he manages to obtain inside the demonic den. That way, Qingji can consider them the interest for the extra week. Qingji realizes that the protagonist is not afraid at all of entering a wild demonic den, since he is only thinking about his debts and interest, which shows that this boy truly is no ordinary person. The protagonist changes the subject, saying that there is one more thing he came there to discuss, something of extreme importance. After hearing what Si Chun has to say, Qingji becomes completely shocked and even somewhat surprised by the information. That afternoon at Qingshui High School, Siyun finally finishes her last exam and now it is time for summer vacation. She remembers that this is also the day of her brother's graduation evaluation. 4 years ago, she remembers that the protagonist was happy because he had been admitted to the National University of the Awakened after elemental potential was detected within his body, allowing him to enter the university. At the time, she was extremely happy to see that her older brother would become an awakened just like their parents. Si Chun thought that this way he could join a powerful guild and earn a lot of money so that she could have a better life, and perhaps he might even be able to discover what happened to their mother and father. Si-yoon loved that idea, thinking that her brother truly was amazing and the best brother in the world, and that he would definitely become an extremely powerful person in the future. Sometime later, the two were upset because he was already in his final year and still had not awakened. However, to keep his sister from worrying too much, he always put a smile on his face, saying that apparently he simply needed to work a little harder. She knows very well that ever since he entered the university, he has always worked harder than all of his classmates, but in the end, he was the only one who failed to awaken anything at all. Watching everyone around him awaken one after another must have been extremely painful. Yet he never lets her see it, always trying to protect her. Zhu Tong, her classmate, arrives excitedly and says that this year the National University had 2 students who led their teams to perfect scores, and even the vice president of the Guild Alliance personally praised them. It is all over the news. While talking about it, she asks whether her friend's brother also studies there. But Si-yoon becomes somewhat uncomfortable because she thinks he must be suffering from failing to awaken. Suddenly, a man stops in front of them. He is Jin Duishin, one of her classmates. He says that he reserved a private room on the top floor of the Zifeng building for 8 o'clock that night and asks whether she is free. Her friend is surprised and asks since when she has known the school heartthrob. But Si-yoon simply ignores both of them and runs away. As she runs, she can only think about her brother because everyone at the university is getting perfect scores in the evaluation and appearing in the news, while her older brother has not even managed to awaken yet. Knowing that causes a deep pain in her heart, so she needs to hurry home and prepare an especially delicious meal to try to cheer him up. A few hours later, already at night, the food is on the table and the protagonist is surprised, asking when she prepared all of it. While he is excited about all the food, his sister is not nearly as happy. The evening news begins playing. It reports that earlier that morning, the National University successfully concluded its practical graduation evaluation, and that Vice President Carl of the Guild Alliance was personally present and interacted warmly with the students. Si-yoon pays attention only to her brother because he is acting exactly as she expected. He is trying to pretend that everything is fine once again. But failing the graduation evaluation must have been a devastating blow, and even so, he is not showing any of it. The report continues saying that the evaluation produced an extremely rare result of dual champions. 2 students led their teams to perfect scores. The vice president highly praised the above-average performance and specifically highlighted one of the leaders who achieved a perfect score, student Si-chun. Upon hearing this, Si-yoon looks at the report in surprise, asking about the perfect score and the student's name. Meanwhile, at the Gong family residence, Patriarch Gong Lin points out that the stage had already been prepared for his son and the audience had also been gathered for him. But the result was a complete failure because his son managed to ruin everything by failing to win and losing to a newcomer who is not even worth remembering. Therefore, he deserves all that punishment. His father points out that from that moment on, he no longer has any autonomy. He then says that he has already scheduled the additional practical match for 1 week later. Since his son could not accomplish it on his own, he will do it for him because no matter what he has to do, first place will belong to their family. Back at the protagonist's home, they continue watching the news, which says that Carl found student Si-chun's performance deeply impressive. So he hopes the country will continue working hard to cultivate more outstanding talents like him. Still shocked by the news, Si-yoon asks her brother whether the Si-chun they are mentioning on television is really him. The protagonist says yes, and she drops her spoon onto the floor. Still frozen in place, she thinks that her own older brother not only led his team to a perfect score in the graduation evaluation, but was also praised by the vice president of the Guild Alliance. Si-yoon remained silent for a while and tears begin streaming down her face because her foolish brother truly became someone incredible. On the same day as the practical graduation evaluation, but later that night, the vice president is enjoying a wonderful meal. He calls Ling Yuan and asks how things are progressing. She hands him a file saying that it contains all the reports compiled so far. Over the past year, he has not exposed any traces, so he may already be aware of the existence of the 2 of them. The vice president thanks her for her hard work and asks her to try some of the meat because it is delicious. Ling Yu points out that there is one more thing. Recently, she noticed a suspicious person, and he came into contact with the vice president not long ago. The increase in that boy's abilities over such a short period of time is astonishing, something that should basically be impossible to achieve. But at that moment, inside the magic tower, the protagonist is training once again. He has already spent more than half a month on the first floor of the magic tower and has nearly wiped out every magical beast on that floor. Now he is completely adapted to fighting in an environment with gravity 10 times stronger than normal. And after the battle during the graduation evaluation ended, his lightning assassin class gained 1 star. Therefore, frequently using a certain class can increase its proficiency, which means that none of the 4 classes he currently possesses has reached its limit yet. He placed that additional star into the most important attribute for an assassin, speed. By increasing his speed, he should reach the level of an A-rank assassin. Even so, he still cannot land a hit on the boss of that floor, but that does not stop him from trying again. He activates Lightning Assassin and God of Lightning, then charges directly toward the boss, ignoring all the others. Since that boss, the Lion King, possesses an extremely strange ability. Every time Sichin finds an opening and tries to attack him, the Lion King instantly disappears and then appears beside the lioness that is farthest away from the protagonist. They quickly adjust their positions according to the situation, but the formation always remains unchanged. There are always 2 lionesses responsible for close-range combat, while the other 2 wait at a distance, and the Lion King always keeps as much distance as possible from the protagonist. As the boss, that monster has never made a single move on its own. So what exactly is the Lion King's classification? One of the lionesses tries to attack him, but the protagonist manages to counterattack. However, the same thing happens once again. When he tries to kill one of the lionesses, she also disappears instantly and appears beside the Lion King. As soon as he stops, another lioness rushes forward to lure him into attacking, but no matter what happens, the same pattern keeps repeating. They strictly maintain their formation, cooperating perfectly with one another, constantly attacking and disappearing, moving back and forth before attacking again without stopping. They create an endless cycle, waging a relentless war of attrition against their opponent. Si-chun is already losing his patience, realizing that the boss is merely playing with him. However, he realizes that he is no longer the same as before, and wonders why he is trying to win by competing directly in speed. He jumps back and switches classes because if his opponents do not want to face him head-on, then why should he not use a mage class to deal with all of them at once? Now at level 17, he uses his Ice Bone Skeleton King transformation. That class can condense the moisture in the air into sharp blades after aggregation to strike enemies. Not to mention that it also possesses the Ice Explosion Bomb, which condenses ice element energy to its limit, before exploding and freezing every object within a radius of 20 meters. It can also be advanced into the Giant Ice Explosion Bomb, freezing everything within a radius of 100 meters, and it can even be disguised before exploding. Si-chun attacks with the ice blades, devastating the entire battlefield at once. Even though a mage is weak in close combat, it dominates long-range attrition and crowd control. He launches another attack toward the Lion King, who manages to dodge by teleporting to the lioness farthest from him. However, the protagonist begins closing in on the group as a whole, surrounding all of them with his ice blades. This is part of his plan because the moment his opponent is forced into his attack range, the Giant Ice Explosion Bomb will finish the job and leave no room for anyone to escape. After the massive explosion, all of his opponents are frozen. He switches classes to the Purgatory Demon, saying that the battle on the first floor of the Magic Tower has come to an end. With Triple Gravity Tribulation, he increases his attack power and cuts down the Lion King. With that, all the lionesses also collapse and begin disintegrating, leaving only the Lion King's body behind. After his victory, he manages to rise to level 24, gaining 4 Phantom Lion Bones and 1 Phantom Heart. But the greatest reward is devouring that monster, because now he will finally learn what its ability actually is. That monster is the Star Phantom Lion King, a beast tamer. It possesses Beast Bond, Starlink, allowing it to forcibly form contracts with beasts, with a certain chance of recruiting them as contracted beasts. The greater the intimidation it exerts, the higher the success rate. If the monster dies, the contracted beast also dies. Beast Bond's Star Trail Leap consumes mental power to teleport to a contracted beast or summon it to its side. This is the first time Sichin has ever seen that class, but now he understands why that monster never fought him directly. Since its attributes are not very high, it can only rely on contracted beasts to deal damage. Not to mention that the teleportation ability is extremely useful. He can also forcibly form contracts with beasts, but he needs intimidation to obtain a contracted beast. He will have to be stricter. While analyzing his new ability, he notices that the environment is changing and transforming into a desert. Perhaps that was the original appearance of the first floor from the very beginning. However, the place looks extremely desolate, and he wonders what must have happened there to leave everything in that state. Right in front of him, a small portal begins to appear, but before passing to the second floor, he realizes that something is watching him from between some bones. A small lion cub is growling, trying to protect its territory. Sichin realizes that the little lion is probably the last one remaining, and even though the protagonist has already eliminated the Lion King, that monster did not disappear, which means that it was not a contracted beast. But as he approaches, he notices that the little creature has star chains wrapped around its body, and may have been imprisoned there by the Phantom Lion King. Sichin charges forward with everything he has, frightening the little lion. But his true target is not the lion itself, but the chains imprisoning it. That way, he can return freedom to the little animal. Sichin knows very well that this must have been the cub's home, where it lost its companions and saw its home destroyed. So, the two of them understand that feeling very well. However, even though the little lion is extremely lonely, the protagonist asks it to keep living well because he now needs to move on to the next floor. Before passing to the next floor, something appears in front of him. A beast contract request has been received. When the other party voluntarily sends the contract request, the recruitment success rate is 100%. He can also unlock passive abilities. The first passive ability is that after signing the contract, the beast's attributes increase, and the experience it gains is transferred to the master in the same proportion. The second passive ability is that after signing the contract, if the beast is in danger, the protagonist can access its vision. Sichin stares at the little lion, which is happily wagging its tail. The system says that it can be contracted because Lion King Leo wants to establish a contract with him. Sichin asks if it really wants to follow him. The lion simply growls at him as if answering yes. The protagonist explains that he intends to clear the entire magic tower, floor by floor, and with each floor, the monsters will become even more brutal. But little Leo continues insisting, so the protagonist decides to agree and accepts signing a contract with the little monster. As soon as the two establish the contract, the system announces that the contract with Lion King Leo has been successfully established and finalized, and now the two of them can move on to the next challenge together. Before they enter, the protagonist tells his little animal that it needs to protect itself while he is fighting, but as soon as they enter the second floor of the tower, Sichin realizes that he is inside a volcano, and it is so hot there that he feels as though he could melt at any moment. As he walks, he wonders what he will encounter in that place. He senses something coming toward him, but before he can even see it clearly, he is killed in the blink of an eye. He wakes up startled because he barely managed to see anything before being eliminated. That means his next opponent possesses terrifying combat power. Siyun knocks on the door and calls him to have breakfast. As soon as he goes to eat, he is impressed, seeing that breakfast is far more elaborate than usual. Siyun asks him to remember to wash the dishes after eating. In addition, he also needs to hang up the clothes from the washing machine in half an hour. The protagonist becomes confused and asks where she is going in such a hurry since summer vacation has already started, but she says that she has a summer job to do. Sichin asks what she is talking about because he already told her to leave all financial matters under his responsibility. Excited by her brother's performance, Siyun points out that he has already managed to build his own reputation. Therefore, she also needs to do the same because she does not want to fall behind. Besides, staying at home all summer without doing absolutely anything is far too boring. She says goodbye to him and once again reminds him not to forget the chores she asked him to do. After eating, he washes the dishes and hangs up the clothes. But he knows that his sister has always been like this, living with determination and strength all the time. Even though she is clearly only a teenager, when he is around her, he is the one who seems to be taken care of. Once the university matters are over, he will deal with the Demon King of Wrath and will not be able to stay by her side for much longer. And she is the only person he simply cannot stop worrying about, capable of killing anything and anyone who dares threaten her, even for a single second. He remembers that there is something he would like to try and call his little pet. Sichin is surprised to see that he really can summon his contracted beast outside the Dream Magic Tower. But if taking care of a small dog is already difficult, imagine taking care of a young lion. However, what he is really planning is to have Leo follow his sister whenever she is outside. As soon as she is in danger, he will know immediately and can rush to her no matter where he is. And since she has loved cats and dogs ever since she was little, she will probably accept a lion cub as a pet. While he is coming up with his perfect plan to keep his sister safe at all times, he hears some noises coming from the kitchen, and when he gets there he realizes that things are not going quite as well as he expected. Somewhere else, near an alley, a security camera has been destroyed and a man is severely injured, desperately trying to fight for his life. But the monster continues approaching and finishes him off, devouring him completely. Later that same day, Ziyun is exhausted but finally manages to finish her shift. Since many people are buying milk tea during summer vacation, and standing all day is extremely tiring. She passes through the same alley where the camera was broken, wondering whether her brother will like the flavor she is bringing him. But at that moment, someone calls out to her saying that she has finally arrived. Jindu Oxen is there once again with a bouquet of roses, having waited for her for a long time. He points out that last time she ran out of school without answering his invitation. But she does not need to worry because he reserved the top floor of the same building again for that night. Uncomfortable with the situation, Ziyun simply asks how he knows where she lives. The boy says that his father is the director of the first hospital, so getting that kind of information is nothing difficult for him. Ziyun rejects his invitation once again, saying that they do not live in the same world, so he should not look for her anymore. Jindu Oxen does not handle rejection very well and raises his voice, grabbing her arm and asking whether she has any idea how difficult it is to reserve an entire floor of that building. Besides, he invited a lot of people, so her not showing up would be extremely disrespectful. Ziyun asks why she should care about him, not to mention that it is extremely creepy to have some guy hanging around someone else's home like that. Jindu Oxen asks who she is calling creepy, and who she thinks she is because he has been far too gentle with her until now, and if she wants to test him, he can deal with her in a single minute. At that moment, she headbutts him in the face and tells him to go to the hospital and see whether his father can fix that defective brain of his. She tells him never to bother her again because he has already ruined her day. As soon as she gets home, she falls in love with the beast and asks where her brother found such an adorable magical beast. Ziyun tells her that the little guy's name is Leo and that he is now her responsibility. His sister becomes even happier and asks whether she can really keep the little lion. But then she realizes that only adult male lions have manes. So how does such a tiny lion already have such a large mane? However, she decides to let it go and promises that tomorrow she will go directly to obtain a magical beast adoption certificate and register little Leo. Si-chun is satisfied. Now he no longer has much reason to worry since he can appear by her side at any moment. At that moment he receives a notification on his phone. The Guild's Supervision and Management Department sends him a message saying that after the department's review, his application has been submitted and approved. If he has any questions, he can contact the Guild's Supervision and Management Department immediately. Si-chen's application has been approved and now the plan can proceed without any problems. Next, he will win the additional test in 6 days and settle everything. 6 days later, on the day of the additional evaluation, Gongxian begins explaining the details of the test. After several discussions, it was decided that the test will take place inside the wild demonic den of the Greenlight Forest. According to the analysis equipment, that den is D rank. According to the agreement made earlier, the two of them will be evaluated inside the same demonic den. The environment inside a wild demonic den is completely unknown and the risk is much greater than in the dens used for ordinary evaluations. 3 members of high-ranking guilds from the country of Shenghe have been sent to serve as examiners. They will enter the den together with the 2 candidates and serve both as protection and to evaluate their performance and true potential. The first is Ivan from the Imperial Guild, a C-rank enchanter. The second is Caillou, a C-rank shooter from the Divine Eyes Guild, and finally Satayuda, a C-rank star warrior from the Infeng Guild. The final result will be decided based on the scores given by the examiners. Once again, that idiot Gong Lin had done a few things behind the scenes. He thinks that those 3 examiners need to do an excellent job and make sure everything happens without leaving any traces. The university director asked whether the vice president should not have finished that trip 2 days ago. Carl asked whether there is really anything more interesting than this happening right now. It has been many years since he last witnessed a duel between geniuses, and looking at those two even gives him a certain sense of anticipation. Gong Xuan begins the final evaluation and the two enter the demonic den. As soon as they enter, the examiners notice deadwood everywhere, and it appears to be a flora-type demonic den. But the moment the protagonist steps into that place, an alert flashes red in front of him because a high-risk magical beast has been detected. Si-chun is somewhat surprised by this since it is the first time he has seen the demonic heart issue an alert like that. However, within a few seconds, the alert disappears. But what he finds even stranger is that this is a D-rank demonic den. So why is there a high-level magical beast inside? The two begin walking while the examiners remain a little farther behind. As soon as a venomous ant appears, Gong Yun quickly charges toward it, while the protagonist simply ignores everything. Yuta is impressed seeing that Gong Yun's reaction is incredibly fast, but the magical beasts inside a wild demonic den are far more resilient than those at the school. They are stronger and much more vicious. Gong Yun handles the first attacks well and splits the monster in half with a single strike. Immediately afterward, he finishes the monster before it has any chance to do anything else. Caillou gives him a score of 10. Saying that the young man attacked the instant the beast appeared and continuously neutralized every long-range surprise attack. Ivan also gives him a 10 because the young man identifies and cuts off the monster's poison-firing organs at the first opportunity, leaving it unable to fight. Yuta does the same, giving him a 10 because he did not hesitate to use his decisive strike to eliminate his opponent once and for all. His positioning, crowd control, and finishing move were all as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. On top of that, against a D-rank magical beast from a wild demonic den, for a student to remain that calm and make decisions like that is truly impressive. On the other hand, the protagonist did not react at all when the beast appeared and has only been wandering around by himself. His performance has been a complete disaster. Carl asks Yuan Long what he thinks Si-chun is looking for. The director guesses that he must be searching for a way to obtain a high score directly and quickly. Si-chun stops right above his target because he has finally found what he was looking for. With one attack, he destroys a nest, causing several monsters to appear at the same time and surprising all the examiners. Si-chun uses his god of lightning transformation and eliminates every monster in a single instant. The three examiners ask what he is doing because the report said that he was only E-rank, but what they just witnessed is far too absurd. Now the evaluators do not know exactly how to react because they cannot give a low score to that kind of power, even while trying to claim that he was reckless. The director and the vice president of the alliance begin laughing because they perfectly guessed what he was really trying to do right at the beginning of the evaluation. A duel like this is already unfolding, making things more and more interesting. Suddenly the signal is lost and the director asks what is happening. Outside the demonic den, the monitoring equipment begins going haywire because of an abnormal signal. The detection level simply cannot be read. Suddenly the portal entrance disappears completely and a sound wave begins affecting the people inside. But the moment the protagonist hears it, he knows exactly whose voice it is because that voice belongs to the Demon King of Wrath. The people outside become desperate because the entrance to the den has disappeared, and they still do not know exactly what is happening since the equipment suddenly detected an anomaly in the signal before everything vanished. Gong Xian shouts for them to call for reinforcements immediately, asking whether something is happening inside the demonic den. The examiners notice that strange sound, almost as if it were music. The protagonist already knows exactly what it is, because it is the sound of the Demon King of Wrath, but he does not understand why Wrath's voice is appearing there, since he should only appear 3 years in the future. The demonic heart continues warning that a high-risk organism has been detected. He looks back and realizes that it is coming from inside that cave. A monster begins to emerge with a powerful aura, but this time the monster says that the humans have taken the bait. Yuta is surprised to see that the monster can speak, because a beast capable of speaking the human language must be at least upper C rank. So how can something like that exist inside a D-rank demonic den? Without thinking twice, he charges forward saying that a monster of that level is far too dangerous for the two candidates, so they need to stay back while he handles the situation. However, before he can even make a move, one of his arms is torn off, the monster continues attacking, and eventually one of its attacks pierces the student council president's shoulder, declaring that all of them are going to die there. Gong Yen refuses to lose like that and cuts off a piece of the monster, managing to put some distance between them. The student council president points out that the boss attacked him first, and according to the ownership rules for clearing a demonic den, that monster belongs to Gong Yen, so the protagonist cannot interfere in the battle. Si-chun uses the demonic heart to check its level, but the other two examiners warn the young master that he needs immediate treatment. Therefore, they suggest temporarily suspending the exam and retreating immediately, because that boss is far too dangerous. Gong Yen uses his firepower to stop the bleeding, saying that he will not retreat. The protagonist is impressed by that technique. The student council president charges forward with everything he has, because that battle is not over yet. Outside, Lin Wukong, captain of the Imperial Guild team, points out that there have been previous cases where the entrance to a demonic den disappeared. This means that there are intelligent beasts inside. They open the entrance to the demonic den themselves and wait for humans to enter before trapping them like fish in a barrel. Still worried about the situation, Gong Xian asks what they should do because the young master is still inside. Wukong explains that there is only one way to make the exit appear again. The people inside must eliminate the boss of the demonic den. Still worried, Gong Xian feels slightly relieved. At most, there should be a C-rank boss inside, and their average strength is C-rank, so it should not be too difficult for them. Wukong explains that it is not that simple, that supposed D-rank classification is merely a disguise created by the boss inside. Based on his observations, that demonic den is probably the true source behind the case of the missing awakened they have been investigating for such a long time. That means it is actually a high-risk den, at least B-rank. Inside, the two are still engaged in a fierce battle, but Gong Xian handles the situation extremely well and finally finds an opening, severing the monster's head with a single move. Kai Yu is impressed that the boy managed to defeat the boss by himself, and the young master's strength truly cannot be underestimated. Ivan, who is helping his companion, asks whether he can already feel his arm normally again, even though he still feels some discomfort. Yuta is grateful that he was treated in time, but when he looks at his device, he realizes that they have lost their connection with the outside. Caillou points out that all signals have been cut off, and even the compass positioning system has stopped working. Even the camera drone sent to broadcast the evaluation has been damaged. Suddenly, the body of the monster lying on the ground rises despite having no head, and tries to attack the young master from behind, but the protagonist tears the monster apart before it can do anything. Unable to understand what happened, Gong Xian says that he clearly cut off that monster's head. So how could it still move? Si-chun then tells them that the magical beast he just defeated was not the true boss. It had been hypnotized from the beginning, which is why it could still move even after being killed. He points out that all of them need to leave the demonic den immediately, or they will probably be the next ones to be hypnotized. Gong Xian is surprised by this information, and asks how the protagonist knows all of that. As always, nothing the protagonist says is taken seriously. Yuta thinks he is only talking nonsense because that demonic den should have, at most, a C-rank boss, and the monster they just faced was exactly at that level, so how could it not have been the boss? The demonic heart repeatedly warns of the presence of a high-risk being. The song begins again, and all of them are hypnotized. The protagonist manages to protect himself, but realizes that it is already too late. He knows those sound waves better than anyone. In his previous life, Wrath used that type of sound wave to hypnotize and massacre countless ordinary humans throughout the world. The three hypnotized people begin walking. Si-chun is certain that the boss of that den must have some connection to Wrath. Therefore, they need to meet, and no matter how things end, he pretends to be hypnotized and begins moving toward the center of the cave. Just like Wrath, the sound wave used for hypnosis is in the alpha band. To deal with Wrath, he had prepared in advance an audio track in the beta band, capable of neutralizing those effects. Those people could die at any moment, and to prevent that, he needs to eliminate the boss as quickly as possible. As soon as they enter, the boss says that the fresh meat has finally arrived, but before it can make any move, Gong Yen grabs the protagonist's arm and asks him to wait. He points out that he does not know what method the protagonist used to escape the hypnosis, but he also managed to maintain his consciousness in his own way. However, they have a very serious problem on their hands. If they attack recklessly and expose everything, everyone will be in tremendous danger. If those eggs right in front of them happen to hatch, they will have to face dozens of C-rank magical beasts, not to mention the boss standing behind them, and they will definitely fail the mission. He continues by saying that the boss disguised that place as a low-level demonic den, solely to lure in awakened and drain them to the last drop. Therefore, the boss will probably approach them on its own. Because of that, his suggestion is that they continue pretending to be hypnotized and wait until the boss gets close. That way, they can attack together. Si-chun is impressed because he never imagined that Gong Yen could think that far ahead. However, that plan will not work. The boss does not need to move at all, it only needs a single thought to make the hypnotized people take their own lives. Before they can do that, Si-chun acts as quickly as possible and knocks all of them unconscious. The boss realizes that something is wrong with its food and immediately orders all of its servants to attack. Gong Yen thinks that he will have to use the emergency plan. He takes the lead and tells the protagonists that he needs a favor. He asks Si-chun to take the 3 examiners out of the demonic den. He will hold those magical beasts back, and even if he cannot defeat them, he should still be able to buy some time. One of the monsters charges toward him and he begins fighting because he was the one who suggested the additional test. And that decision ended up dragging everyone into this crisis. However, he is already close to his limit. In the past, Gong Yen and his younger brother were forced to fight each other almost to the death simply because their father wanted it and they were only 8 years old. Whoever won the fight between them would be allowed to sit at the table and eat a meal with their father, while the loser would have to remain on their knees throughout the entire night. After the meal, in the middle of the night, Gong Yen, feeling sorry for his younger brother, brought him some food. Gong Chen warns his older brother that if their father finds out, he will end up being punished again. But Gong Yen does not care and tells his younger brother to stop being foolish and just eat. Because of that, he ends up being punished once again. Their father always asked whether they knew why that family had reached its current position because he, their father, had always been a winner and only winners had the right to dictate the rules. They simply needed to follow those rules. Gong Yen, exhausted from being beaten so much, asks his father whether, if he managed to defeat him, he would then be allowed to dictate the rules. Gong Lin finds the idea interesting and asks his son to challenge him. But Gong Yen ends up being brutally defeated. Completely injured, he shouts that he challenged his father. Not those other people, so why were they fighting him? Gong Lin explains that the strength he possesses is not limited to his personal strength, but includes all the power under his command. The rules of the human world are not as simple as Gong Yen imagines. But there is one absolute truth, and that truth is victory. The means do not matter, only the result. As his son, he should always take first place, even if he has to abandon family, responsibilities, ideals, or anything else. His only duty is to win. That is the only value he has in this world. Gong Yen keeps thinking that victory is the only value of his existence, so nothing else matters. Back in the present, Gong Yen is on his knees. Even though he is exhausted, he is still determined because all of this began because of him, so he must take responsibility for putting an end to it. Si-chun approaches and says that apparently he misunderstood his friend. However, he also agreed to the additional test, so he also needs to do something. Therefore, that boss will be his responsibility alone. Gong Yen tells the protagonist not to do that because they are not capable of winning. That boss's strength is far beyond what they currently possess and may already be approaching a rank. Therefore, the best option is for him to take everyone there and evacuate immediately. Si-chun admits that the boss will not be easy to deal with, but the gates of the demonic den have already closed. Otherwise, the Imperial Guild squad would have already entered to help them. Gong Yen becomes worried when he learns that the gates are closed, which means that the only way to get out of there alive is to defeat that monster. Si-chun thinks that if that boss really is a rank, then its combat power should be similar to that of the Phantom Lion King from the Magic Tower. Another monster charges forward to attack the protagonist, but he manages to defend himself. However, another one attempts a sneak attack. Gong Yen quickly moves in to help him, but several more continue approaching. Gong Yen becomes worried because no matter how many they manage to kill with that many enemies, sooner or later they will collapse from exhaustion. Si-chun activates the lightning assassin's electric blade and strikes several monsters at the same time. Immediately afterward, he charges forward with God of Lightning, destroying all the monsters around him. Gong Yen cannot understand how that is possible because the assassin class has little strength when surrounded, which is an extreme disadvantage. However, the protagonist strikes every vital point with incredible precision. In addition, he is compensating for his lack of strength with speed and technique, not to mention that his speed is as high as that of an A rank. Seeing this, the boss activates Supreme Enhancement, making all of its servants somewhat stronger. Even so, the protagonist continues advancing while Gong Yen gathers as much power as possible. Despite attacking several times, the protagonist can no longer be as effective as before because those magical beasts with their enhanced attributes are now close to B rank. Their shells are extremely tough and he is having difficulty striking their vital points. Therefore, he needs to find a way to break through that armor as quickly as possible, otherwise they will be in serious trouble. Gong Yen thanks his companion because the time he bought was enough for him to accumulate his power. Meanwhile, inside Si Yun's house, her friend Zhu Tong has come over for a visit. She apologizes for being late because she bought some drinks for them. Si Yun says that it is fine because her brother still has not returned. Her friend is surprised by that and asks whether he already knows that she passed the entrance exam for the Arts Academy. Si Yun says not yet, but she had told him that she had something very important to tell him, so perhaps he would return a little later. In the meantime, they could eat something first. However, they have run out of garlic sauce. She asks her friend to wait there because she and her pet will quickly go out to buy some. That way, she can also buy some snacks so they can celebrate properly. After buying a few things, she is happy to see that Leo is extremely well behaved. He does not make any noise or move around inside her bag, and next time, she will buy some snacks for him as well. Several people are holding a photo of her in their hands. All they need to do is move in and grab the girl. However, the commander behind the operation tells them not to rush and simply follow her until she leaves the area covered by cameras. Then they can deal with the situation. Si Yun realizes that those men have been following her ever since she left the market, but she does not know what they want. Leo becomes slightly irritated and she notices that he also sensed the danger, but she asks him to stay well hidden because they are about to go on an adventure. Back inside the den, Gong Yen shouts that this is his ultimate killing move, and even if that monster is extremely powerful, there will not even be a body left to tell the story. He attacks with his extreme blazing blade piercing explosion, destroying all the monsters in front of him and striking the boss behind them, causing a massive explosion. Since this is his supreme ultimate technique, he falls to his knees completely exhausted, but at least everything is finally over. However, the monster continues laughing and asks whether that really is the full power those worthless humans possess. Gong Yen begins trembling when he sees that his full power attack did not leave even a scratch on the monster. Si-chun realizes that in the instant before being hit, that monster drained the power of all the magical beasts and formed a high-strength defensive barrier directly in front of itself, preventing the attack from striking it directly. Gong Yen already accepts defeat, saying that apparently they are going to die inside that place. However, the protagonist takes responsibility and tells his new friend that he would like to make a deal with him, pointing out that first place in that competition can belong to him, but Si-chun wants to keep the 1 million prize, and the only condition is that he cannot tell anyone about anything that happens from that moment onward. Si-chun switches classes to the level 24 Purgatory Demon. Gong Yen is stunned when he realizes that the protagonist is actually a dual-class user. Because of his abilities, the protagonist begins absorbing the vitality and strength of the corpses around him, converting them into his own power at a fixed ratio. With that, his combat power increases tremendously. His vitality and strength reach their maximum level. He points out once again that he already said he would deal with that filthy piece of trash by himself. The boss tries to use its ability Enigma Soul Requiem. Even with those cutting sound waves striking the two of them, nothing happens to the protagonist. He continues approaching one step at a time. The monster falls into complete despair, asking how it is unable to injure that human. It uses its serpents to attack because its other attacks failed, but with a single movement, the protagonist cuts through all of them with extreme ease. Even so, the monster remains confident, saying that he should save his breath because its defense is unbreakable. However, before absolute power, no defense can endure. He attacks with maximum strength, shattering the monster's defense into countless pieces. Gong Yuan cannot believe the magnitude of the strength he had been trying to compete against. Si Chun activates triple gravity tribulation, super heavy mode, and punches straight through the monster's body with a single strike, defeating it once and for all. Si Chun orders the monster to immediately tell him what it is to Wrath. The monster is surprised and asks how the protagonist could even know the name of Lord Wrath. But Si Chun has no interest in pointless conversation and tells it to get straight to the point. However, the monster says that if it knew where Wrath was, it honestly would not be standing there instead of going to break his seal. Si Chun is surprised by the part about breaking the seal, which means that someone broke the seal to awaken Wrath. Before dying, the demon begins shouting that the protagonist's time will come because the Lord will rise again, reclaim his demon armies, and slaughter every last worthless human down to their bones. Si Chun simply devours the monster completely and rises to level 25. At least that was useful to him. Now he knows that Wrath did not appear out of nowhere. After all these years, Wrath had already been in that world long before anyone knew, but somehow he was sealed away. However, something happened during that period, and Si Chun still does not know exactly what it was. With everything resolved, Gong Yuan points out that he never imagined he would witness something like that firsthand, which means that the protagonist is on a completely different level and he cannot deny it. Therefore, in that contest, the true winner is Si Chun. Not to mention that he promises to take everything that happened there to his grave without saying a single word. The young master collapses to the ground because he has lost too much blood and completely exhausted his energy. The protagonist says that the boss is dead and the dungeon exit should already be open, so he only needs to hold on a little longer because the guild will break in at any moment. Si Chun suddenly senses an extremely high level of danger approaching, shares his vision with Lu, and realizes that his sister is in danger. She remembers the rules she had learned, and the first one is that whenever someone is following her, she needs to go somewhere crowded. At that time, Restaurant Street is at its busiest. Once she gets there, she needs to blend into the crowd and then, the second they look the other way, disappear completely. She tries to run, but another man is standing in front of her, saying that he has been waiting for a long time, but the door was locked. Si Yuan shouts, asking who they are and why they know where she lives. The others also begin closing in and she desperately tries to run, but she ends up trapped and falls to the ground. One of the men tells her to catch her breath and entertain them for a little while, then tries to approach her. But at that moment, Lu sends one of them flying and transforms into a massive lion. The disgusting thug shouts, asking where that enormous lion came from and why the people who hired them never said anything about it. They try to fight the lion, but at that moment, Lu suddenly returns to his normal size and collapses unconscious. She runs over to him, asking if he is all right. The man becomes disappointed because he thought the lion was something special, but it did not even last 10 seconds. He tries to grab her and tells her not to waste any more of his time. He will need to knock her unconscious and he will do it himself. But at that moment, the protagonist switches places with Lu, landing an extremely powerful kick directly into the man's face and sending him flying away. Si Chun apologizes to his sister because something happened and he took longer than he expected. The thugs ask where that guy came from because there was no one there a second ago. Desperate, Si Yun says that she has no idea how those guys tracked her down, not to mention that all of them are awakened. So she does not know what they are going to do. But the protagonist asks her to calm down because he is there now. The leader of the group gets up, saying that he had let his guard down, but that brat just made the biggest mistake of his life, and now he is going to take both of their heads to that boy and demand triple the payment. Si Chen's hands begin to tremble. He asks his sister to stay behind him and promises that this will not take long. She remembers that her brother always used to get into trouble and end up being beaten, but whenever she came over to try to protect him and the boys went after her, something would awaken inside him. An uncontrollable fury would make him fight back even without strength, defeating everyone in front of him like a wild animal in the most brutal way possible. He always did the same thing. He would stand in front of her, saying that everything was fine and that she did not need to be afraid. The three thugs try to attack him, but the biggest mistake they made was trying to lay a finger on his sister. Still worried, Si-yoon thinks that there are three awakened right there, and each one of them looks like they have nothing to lose, so there is no way her brother can face them alone. But Si-chun slams one of their heads into the wall as if he were throwing a monster aside. The other one tries to attack as well, but is easily knocked down. The last one also tries to use his powers, saying that he is nothing more than a skinny brat in a school uniform, so he will be turned into a human pincushion. But the protagonist dodges every attack, leaving the man completely desperate. At that moment, his sister remembers that the protagonist not only passed the graduation combat evaluation, but also dominated the exam, leading his team to a perfect score and breaking the school's historical record. First place, number 1 overall. He's not just another ordinary awakened, he is on a completely different level from the others. Si-chun destroys the last man's teeth and leaves all three unconscious on the ground within a few seconds. He asks his sister to take Leo home and stay inside, because he is going to leave those pieces of trash at the guard station and return before she even notices. Sometime later, inside an abandoned building, the three men are tied up. Their leader wakes up and begins shouting, asking where they are and why they were brought there. Because their skulls feel as though they have been split in half, but with a serious and empty gaze, the protagonist asks whether they belong to the Black Mountain Association. That association never lifts a finger without receiving payment in advance, so he wants to know who is funding the operation. However, the leader laughs and says that the protagonist already knows he does this for money, so he cannot say anything because the moment he opens his mouth, he will be dead in that line of work. Si-chun had been hoping for that answer. Now he can use the most difficult and also the most entertaining method. He switches classes to the Phantom Sorcerer and begins enchanting the three of them, but that is not everything he intends to do. First will be the legs, then the hands. That is exactly what he deserves for getting near his sister with those filthy damned hands. Another thug, terrified, asks what the hell the protagonist is doing to his friend, but now it is the other man's turn. Before suffering the same consequences, he shouts that he will talk and reveals that it was the son of the director of the first hospital, and his name is Jean Duishin. Meanwhile, Jean Duishin is at the rooftop pool of Purple Peak Tower on the top floor. One of his friends walks over and starts laughing, asking whether it is true that the same girl rejected him twice and wondering what happened, since he cannot even win over a student. Jean Duishin says that bitch made him look like an idiot in front of everyone twice, so tonight she is going to regret every second of it. He gets up to go to the bathroom, but at that moment, Si-chun appears behind him and asks whether he is Jean Duishin. In the security department, the two guards are talking about how those rich kids rented out the entire place again, and it is no surprise that all the cameras there are turned off. They are probably upstairs having the time of their lives. However, one of them comments that he heard most of the girls upstairs did not go there willingly. They were lured in and trapped, and then the entire case disappeared. Their parents buried everything beneath a mountain of money, and the list of atrocities those guys have committed would be enough to fill an entire drama series. Back in the bathroom, Jean Duishin asks who the protagonist is, because that entire floor is completely off-limits to the public. So how did he manage to get up there? He says he is going to call the police right that moment and have him thrown out. Si-chun takes the phone from one of the thugs and calls the number that hired the group, and the boy's phone rings. That proves that he was the one who sent people after his sister. The boy becomes completely terrified, asking why Si-chun has that phone and demanding to know where those people are and what he did to them. But the protagonist is so furious about everything that he crushes the phone in his hand without saying a single word, and the boy begins shouting for help. He's thrown outside and lands beside the pool, screaming for help. But when he looks ahead, he realizes that everyone is unconscious in the water. Si-chun continues approaching like a demon, while the boy crawls backward across the floor in fear, asking what is wrong with him and what he ever did to provoke the protagonist. The boy tries to use his father's influence, saying that he is the director of the first hospital, so if the protagonist lays even a single finger on him, he is dead. Si-chun orders him to shut up immediately, and under the power of hypnosis control, the boy freezes in place. The protagonist orders them to grab him. Pure evil does not hide. Only inside dungeons it still enters the world every single day. These people use their own money to commit whatever crimes they want. Then they use their own power to make sure none of it ever comes to light. They move through that world doing whatever they want to, whoever they want, using methods more rotten than anything a demon could ever imagine. The thugs the protagonist captured said that the boy paid them a fortune, but they were supposed to make sure Si-Yun would never forget that night. But this time, that boy ended up targeting someone he never should have touched. Every single threat that comes near his sister, he will hunt down and exterminate, even if doing so means walking straight into the darkest place that exists. He will not hesitate for even a single second. A little earlier, the protagonist was still inside the den, saying that the boss had fallen and the entrance was probably open again, so they only needed to hold on a little longer. Gong Yan tells him that once they get out, he will tell everyone the truth, because the protagonist was the one who saved everyone inside that place. But at that moment, Si-Chun suddenly has a vision of a man approaching and realizes that something is wrong with his sister, so he simply switches places. Gong Yan cannot believe that he possesses more than 2 classes at the same time, so just how many secrets does Si-Chun still have? A few minutes later, Gong Xian rushes inside with the medical team, which immediately begins treating the young master. His uncle asks whether things are really that bad because that monster was B rank. The fact that the 2 of them survived and all the examiners were unharmed was already impressive. But the protagonist was still missing. A member of the rescue team explains that there are no other victims anywhere. Gong Xian thinks that he must have been so frightened that he ran away, so the others need to spread out and search for him. However, all of this is the inspection agency's fault, because through sheer incompetence, they ended up injuring the young master and the others. And the second they get out of there, every one of them will be fired. Gong Lin appears and explains that, in fact, this situation is perfect. An unexpected incident occurred during the exam. The examiners themselves were defeated by monsters, and at the moment when all hope seemed lost, his son stepped forward and saved everyone. So how could anything be more perfect than that? Gong Xian tries to tell the truth, but his father begins squeezing his wound and tells him that he was the one who saved everyone. And that is the story that needs to be told, because everyone inside witnessed it with their own eyes. He keeps pressing down on the wound, saying that his son was the one who resolved everything. And now he needs to clean himself up, because the graduation ceremony is the next day, and there he will finally step into the spotlight. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's home, he, his sister, and her friend are celebrating the fact that she was accepted into the Central Academy of Arts. That way, she will become an incredible artist. Si-Chun is very calm about the news, and his sister asks why he has such a dead expression on his face, because it almost seems as if he already knew about it. But the protagonist explains that he did not, and that he is actually very happy. He thinks that he really did already know, because she received this acceptance letter on the exact same day in his previous life. Zhu Tong admits that she is a little jealous of her friend, because studying in Sanhaven is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Most people never even come close to getting something like that. Si-Yun is not quite as excited because the place is very far away, and the cost of living there must be extremely high. But her brother tells her not to worry about any of that, neither the distance nor the money. After all, once he graduates, he will also be working in Sanhaven. Si-Yun is extremely surprised and asks whether he was really recruited by a guild from there. Zhu Tong can barely believe it because that all the guilds in that place are elite, high-level organizations, literally the best of the best. So how did he manage something like that? The two begin celebrating, extremely happy that they will be able to live together in a new place. Her friend says that now she is dying of jealousy, and promises that she will manage to get into a university there as well. Si-Chun is certain that this time, his sister will not have to give up her dreams for anyone. While taking his shower, he thinks that the threats against his sister have already been dealt with. The graduation exam has been completed and concluded, and according to his agreement with Gong Yan, he will receive his 1 million tomorrow, which is enough to pay off the debt. If Wrath truly was sealed after crossing into the human world, then his estimate of 3 years is becoming more dangerous with each passing day. Because of that, he needs to reach Sanhaven as quickly as possible and find Wrath. That is his highest priority. But before that, He needs someone he can truly trust to watch his back. The graduation ceremony is the next day, and this is the opportunity he has been waiting for. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Ling Yu has once again met with the vice president and points out that Glutton was recently spotted in Everfield County. The moment she received the lead, she went straight to the location, but the security footage had already been erased, leaving behind only a few scratch marks and bloodstains as always. His victims are always awakened, people with rare and exceptional abilities. Not to mention that the ranks of his victims are increasing, which means that the man is becoming stronger and very quickly. Once Glutton begins moving, he does not stop. Her instincts are telling her that he will attack again soon. Carl finds it interesting that he has appeared right now. Of all the developments, this is the most interesting. Ling Yu points out that there is one more thing, and he should take a good look at it. She shows him an image saying that this time, the attack occurred in a narrow alley inside a low-income housing complex. That alley is less than 100 meters away from Si-chen's home, and so far they have not managed to obtain any visual record of Glutton. But the protagonist's recent performance, the way his abilities are growing at a speed that makes no sense, and the way he fights. At this point, she sees two possibilities. The first theory is that Glutton has his eyes on Si-chen, or Glutton is Si-chen himself. The next day, the director's assistant asks whether he really is not going to the graduation ceremony, because those are students he personally raised. Yuan Long explains that all he did was give them a safe place to land when they were still too weak to fly. Now they have grown enough, and it is time for them to seek their own paths. But when he opens the cage, he realizes that one of the little birds did not fly away, and probably does not know where to go. On the day of the ceremony, people are already arriving at the venue. The protagonist's friends are impressed, saying that this is the first time the school has ever set up such a massive hall. But with all the heavyweights from the guilds coming there, they probably wanted to make everything look impressive. However, their biggest question is how the test between the two strongest students in the school ended, because nothing has leaked anywhere, and the school really does not play around when it comes to confidentiality. Ma Long thinks there is no need to even ask, because it is obvious that the protagonist destroyed everything. Gong Chang tells him to stop talking nonsense, because Si-chun has absolutely no chance against his older brother, and the champion will definitely be his brother. Backstage, Gong Lin tells his son that for this graduation ceremony, every major guild in the countries has sent a representative, and the entire Imperial Guild Council is present. The co-founders of the Imperial Guild, Guan Yuan and Titan Ming, are also present, which means that the next Imperial Guild Council election is practically taking place right there. At the moment, his number of votes is tied with Titan Ming's, and that day's ceremony is the perfect opportunity to pull the undecided council members over to his side. That means the position of president will belong to him and no one else. He points out that as soon as the ceremony begins, Vice President Carl will personally present the championship trophy to his son, and the entire world will remember that day. That is where his position will rise all the way to the top, and it will become the most glorious moment in the history of their family. Therefore, his son needs to go up there, give an excellent speech, and not ruin anything. That way, he can prove his value. Gong Yuan is no longer satisfied with any of this, because he knows better than anyone that the true champion was Si-chun, not to mention that he has been controlled by his father his entire life. A short while later, the graduation ceremony begins. After countless hardships and relentless determination, that year's graduation evaluation at the National University has come to a brilliant conclusion. It is a great honor to announce that the 157th graduation ceremony of the National University is now officially underway. Si-chun is also present, but he does not say a single word. The woman continues saying that at this long-awaited moment, they have gathered to witness the crowning of a champion and finally reveal the results of that year's evaluation. The champion must come forward to receive a warm round of applause, because Carl, Vice President of the World Guild Alliance, is present. He will be responsible for announcing that year's champion and personally presenting the award. Carl came solely to witness the extraordinary talent of Easternia's next generation. Now, some of them may not know this yet, but during that year's supplementary evaluation, something extremely unexpected happened. The demonic den assigned for the evaluation, initially classified as D-rank, turned out to be a disguised B-rank high-risk demonic den. Everyone present is shocked, because even a complete professional guild team would have difficulty dealing with the challenge of that level, so they cannot understand how anyone could have survived. Carl announces that it had completely disappeared. One candidate, relying solely on absolute mastery of skill and technique, accomplished the impossible and brought down a high-ranking monster far above his own level. He defeated the lord of a B-rank demonic den completely on his own and brought every member of the team back alive. He is the strongest graduate of his generation and the undisputed champion of that year's evaluation, known as Gong Yen. He stands up and receives everyone's applause, but the protagonist's friends cannot believe that Si Chun lost that contest. Gong Chang and the others mock the situation, saying that his brother truly is different from everyone else. The commotion among them continues, with some people shocked that he managed to defeat such a high-level den, while others celebrate because they already knew that he was truly incredible. Si Chun remains silent, merely remembering the agreement he had made. But now it is time to hear the speech Gong Yen prepared. The council members are already impressed. That young man is worthy of being Gong Lin's son, and apparently that family truly is extraordinary. Gong Yen remembers that his father told him to go up there and prove his worth. However, a conflict is raging inside his mind because, apparently to his father, he is worth nothing more than being a symbol. Gong Yen begins his speech by saying that Vice President Carl was indeed right. Facing a monster far too powerful to defeat, bringing the team back from the edge of the abyss, even while dealing with a high-level den, is something extraordinary and remarkable, but none of that was accomplished by him. The true champion and the person who saved everyone was Si Chun. Even the protagonist himself is somewhat surprised by this, but Gong Yan's father is exploding with rage, trying to understand what his son is saying. Gong Chun and his friends, who had been boasting just moments before, are shocked by the news and wonder whether he has gone insane. Gong Yen continues, saying that during the evaluation, everything went wrong. Inside the demonic den, the examiners were knocked unconscious, leaving only Gong Yen and Si Chun to face all those monsters. And the protagonist is, without a doubt, the most powerful lightning assassin he has ever seen in his entire life. With nothing but raw skill and instinct, he cut through wave after wave of monsters as though they were absolutely nothing. With his own hands, he showed what it truly means to be strong. It was the first time in Gong Yan's life that he had ever seen and awakened at that level. Si Chun was the one responsible for resolving everything. The champion of that year's practical graduation evaluation is unquestionably him. Si Chun is surprised that, even after that entire speech, his secret was still kept safe. This makes people furious, asking what is going on because they were told that the results had been verified by the Wing Squad team, which means the results were falsified. Carl thinks that things are becoming more and more interesting. The protagonist's friends shout that they already suspected all of this because the entire evaluation had been rigged from the beginning. Therefore, there needs to be a complete investigation immediately. Guan Yuan asks whether Gong Lin intends to explain what happened up there because the people deserve an explanation of what truly occurred. But Gong Lin remains silent and storms out of the place in complete fury. Gong Yen tears apart the speech that had been prepared for him and thinks that the kind of life he wants is a road that he himself will choose to follow. Inside the director's office, the bird that had remained behind prepares to fly. At that moment, Gong Yen frees himself from the restraints his father had placed around his neck because those only he can make. The director sees that the final bird has finally discovered where it wants to fly. Gong Yen points out that this time the protagonist won, but the next time they meet, he will definitely be one step ahead. There are thousands of guilds around the world, varying in size and strength. From highest to lowest, they are divided into 5 levels. The strongest are peak guilds, followed by elite guilds, gold guilds, silver guilds, and finally standard guilds. Among all of them, an elite guild is the highest level that most awakened can realistically hope to reach. The Imperial Guild is one of them. Countless people try every possible method to get in, yet almost all of them are rejected. For an ordinary graduate, entering a guild is anything but simple, but for the lucky few who manage to secure a place in an elite guild, it is practically the fulfillment of a lifelong goal. Charleston, the HR manager of the Imperial Guild, registers and verifies the information to confirm the available positions. The protagonist's friends are happy because now their futures are practically secured, since they have managed to get 1 foot inside an elite guild. Gong Chung is not pleased at all. Just imagining those people at work every day is already enough to make him furious. Titan Ming asks how recruitment is progressing. His assistant points out that 2 teams achieved perfect scores that year, so the number of new recruits is higher than usual. They are still in the registration process. Carl also appears there. The co-founder says that it is a surprise to see him and asks whether he is also heading to the recruitment department. Carl says yes because there is someone he would like to say goodbye to before leaving. Titan Ming realizes that he also has a personal interest in that boy, and the vice president confirms it because having a talent like that end up joining the Imperial Guild shows that they are extremely lucky. Charleston notices that one person is still missing and asks where Si-Chen is and why he is not registered yet, because he is literally the only one left behind and Charleston does not like wasting time. His friends begin looking for him and suddenly he arrives. Ma Long asks where he has been because he still has not submitted his registration form. The HR manager, already finding the situation ridiculous, points out that young people these days do not take anything seriously because Si-Chun has barely graduated and already thinks he has the right to fool around like this. Whether he finished in first place or not, he still goes through the same process as everyone else. This is the Imperial Guild, the absolute pinnacle, so he needs to go over there and fill out the form immediately. Si-Chun points out that he is not joining the Imperial Guild. Everyone is shocked when they hear this and asks whether he has truly gone insane. Charleston slams his hand against the table and calls the protagonist a brat because this is not the time to be playing games. They specifically reserved a senior management position in the upper ranks for him, so he should have some idea how many people would throw everything away just to obtain such an opportunity. There are veterans in the Imperial Guild who have worked their entire lives without ever coming close to something like that. Si-Chun points out that he never said he was going to join the Imperial Guild. The HR manager becomes increasingly angry and asks what exactly he is doing there. Carl is extremely pleased by all the commotion because he could not imagine a more perfect moment than this. He walks over to the protagonist and says that if the Imperial Guild is not his style, then he could go to Sandhaven and join the local Ember Star Knights. Everyone is stunned when they hear this because that is a world-renowned peak guild. Its name has appeared in international headlines several times. There are only 6 peak guilds in the entire world, and it is said that if they wanted to they could easily destroy an entire nation. They never recruit publicly, accepting members only through internal recommendations and strictly by invitation. However, the protagonist rejects that offer as well, saying that he is not looking to join any guild. The reason he is there is to find teammates. He shows them his card and his friends are shocked, asking whether he truly created his own guild. Charleston takes the card from his hand and tells him to stop joking around because a fresh graduate running his own guild is ridiculous since that is not how things work. The name of that guild is Black Crow. The manager points out that he has never heard of it in his life and guild registration only opens during a specific period each year. During that time, he would need to pay a registration fee of 1 million. Not to mention that the protagonist has only just graduated and has no recommendation from an already established guild, so his approval should have been impossible. How the hell did he manage to make it happen? The assistant says that the Black Crow Guild really does exist. The Black Crow Guild was registered on May 18th of the year 2157 and approved on June 18th. It was founded by Si-Chen. Gong Yen pays close attention to the registration date. That means the protagonist had been building his own guild an entire month before the evaluation even began, so that is why he only cared about the prize money and did not care at all about first place. From the very beginning, all he ever wanted was his own guild. The Imperial Guild was never part of his plans. In truth, none of them were even on his radar. Carl thinks that Si-Chun and she are cut from the same cloth. The protagonist takes the card back from the manager's hand and says that a guild needs at least 2 members to manage a den and, at the moment, the Black Crow Guild has only him. Therefore, he would like to invite Gong Yen to join his new guild. Some time ago, during Si-Chen's last meeting with Chang Shi, they discussed 2 matters. The first was that he needed 1 more week to make the payment, since the Thai had left him with only half the money. And the second matter, which was even more interesting, was that the truth was he had come from 10 years in the future. The protagonist tells the entire story, saying that in 10 years the world will be destroyed by a group of demon kings, and by that time, he will be the last awakened still alive. The first demon king to appear is called Wrath. He attacks using ripple waves and tears the entire world apart. It is at this moment that a businessman named Qing Shi appears and donates equipment that he himself created, the Stone of Stillness. This stone allows countless people to survive Wrath's ripple attacks. It gave humanity time to breathe and counterattack. Qing Shi is deeply shocked by all of this, because the Stone of Stillness is, in fact, a project designed to block ripple-based magical attacks. However, this project is barely more than a small idea inside his own head. Si Chun invites Qing Shi to work with him. Back in the present, the protagonist returns to the market and, since his loan has been fully repaid, his weapon is exactly where it should be. Si Chun throws down the materials he obtained inside the den, just as they had agreed, as payment for the interest. Qing Shi is pleased with all of it because every material is extremely valuable. The protagonist points out that he was in a great hurry, so that was everything he managed to collect. Qing Shi asks how recruitment for his Black Crow Guild is going. Si Chun explains that, unfortunately, he was rejected. Qing Shi thinks this will delay his trip, but the protagonist says that, in fact, it will speed things up because his original plan had 3 stages. First, he needed to build his own guild from scratch, then increase its rank and earn the right to challenge higher-level demonic dens, and finally, travel to Sandhaven and hunt down the demonic den where Wrath is hidden. But something happened that he did not expect. Wrath may have already appeared in that world. Qing Shi is surprised by the news. Si Chun continues explaining that he needs to reach Sandhaven as quickly as possible, so he will have to find teammates there once he arrives. Qing Shi thinks things are becoming increasingly complicated, so he does not know whether this will help. But if it makes any difference, he has a pop song that he asked a friend to produce. Encoded with a beta frequency, he has already contacted the superstar Michael Bruno. He will finish the song and release it as the main track of his album that year. With his reach in the music world, that song will be everywhere within 1 week at most. And since the protagonist said that the beta frequency can suppress Wrath's alpha ripple attacks, that is the most efficient defense he can create at the moment. Si Chun is surprised by how much he managed to accomplish in a single week. Qing Shi points out that if the future really is destroyed, as the protagonist said, then what he is doing now has more value to him than anything he has ever done before. Not to mention that he has one more thing to give the protagonist. He tosses him a demonic radar. He reverse-engineered it from a smartwatch. If it detects a reading of S rank or higher demonic power, it sounds an alarm and locks onto the exact location. Not to mention that it can also track a target's movements for the previous 10 days. So the protagonist will not find anything like it anywhere else, and it should help him track Wrath. Si Chun thinks it works in a very similar way to his demonic Heart of Flow. However, that watch can display the exact location much more clearly, which means Qing Shi's work really is impressive. Qing Shi is somewhat frustrated because he wanted to become an awakened as well. That way he could truly make a difference. But since he cannot, this will have to be enough. Si Chun explains that he has already done more than enough. Now he can leave the rest to him. Since Wrath is the first demon king to appear, he still knows almost nothing about that monster and only hopes that nothing else goes wrong. During the night at the city's first hospital, the hospital director's idiotic son had his brain completely destroyed and now lives like an animal, shouting that he is nothing but a filthy stray dog while laughing and barking by himself. Ronald Jean, the director of the first hospital and the boy's father, is furious, asking who the hell did that and who turned his son into that thing. He looks at 4 people and says that all of them are a rank awakened from the elite of that country. So they need to find out what happened. No matter what they need to do or what the consequences are, they must find the person responsible and make him suffer. They say that they understand and promise to deliver the culprit's head before the end of the day. But at that moment, an overwhelming pressure fills the entire hospital, making the director feel sick. Even the high-ranking awakened can barely breathe. The monster begins approaching and they prepare for battle. But while they are waiting for whoever is about to come through the door, the monster appears behind them because it is time for his meal. He is Vorlin, the demon king of gluttony. The powers of the awakened are divided into all kinds of classes, but everyone has heard of the 5 main ones. Warriors endure blows and lead the charge. Assassins flank and eliminate targets in the blink of an eye. Mages control the battlefield and deal magical damage. Enchanters purify negative effects and strengthen the team. But there is still one class that is somewhat different from the rest. A class that basically throws all defense out the window in exchange for the most absurd attack power among all classes. And this is the Lord of the second floor of Dreadspire, the Archer class. The protagonist tries to hide and thinks that, judging by the trajectory of that last shot, his opponent must be firing at him from somewhere nearby. That thing's ranged attacks hit like a cannon, but after every shot it needs to hide and reload for a while. Because of that, Sickhen needs to find it before the next attack comes his way. Sickhen carefully observes every part of his surroundings and notices a slight movement. He charges forward with everything he has, looking for the perfect kill, but it was only a distraction. And once again he loses the battle. The next morning, Siyun wakes up and notices that her brother is sitting on the couch asking what happened and whether he did not sleep the night before. Sickhen spent the entire night hunting, but in the end he was made a fool of. Siyun tries to understand the situation a little better and asks what exactly he was hunting, but the protagonist simply asks her to forget about it. He changes the subject, saying that he is thinking about going to Sandhaven in a few days, right after the memorial rituals for their father and mother next week. She's surprised and remembers that their anniversary is already next week. The protagonist stands up, and his sister asks whether he is really leaving that soon. He explains that since it is a new city, he needs to arrive early and get everything organized. He thinks that he needs to put this plan into action, but fortunately he obtained Leo, who can stay with his sister and keep her company. Only because of that can he leave without dying from worry. But there is still one thing that concerns him greatly. Under certain conditions, his bond with Leo is simply severed. The moment he entered the deepest part of that den and the gate closed behind him, his connection with Leo went completely silent for an instant. The bond only returned after he defeated that boss and the gate opened again. Only then could he sense Leo once more. If he had not taken that thing down at that exact moment, even if it had taken only 30 seconds longer, everything could have gone terribly wrong. He looks at his sister and says that before leaving for the new city, he would like to take Leo with him for just a few days. Demonic dens do not appear frequently in that world, and the resources obtained from clearing one are worth a small fortune. Whenever a new den appears, the government holds an auction. The good dens are snatched up by the major guilds almost immediately. What remains are the small, low-value dens released to the public, and those are the dens that small teams compete over. They rush around trying to secure at best a D-rank den. But anything worthwhile has already been taken before it even reaches the board. Because of that, they do not have many options, but the leader asks her to find one more person to complete the team since she knows very well how things work. As soon as she opens the doors, she shouts that they need to hurry. She has a D-rank den and they are missing one member, so they are looking for a warrior. The government rule requires at least 2 awakened. That is how the awakened talent market became the meeting point for awakened to form teams, level up, and survive on their own. Unaffiliated awakened. Those who have never joined a single official guild. So all kinds of people, even those who are extremely weak, try to find any opportunity they can among all of that. And to truly keep his sister safe, Leo needs to enter a demonic den, gain real combat experience, and level up. And since Sichin is the only one left in the Black Crow Guild, he has no rights to any den, while the tower is still far too dangerous to take Leo into. For now, that place is his only chance to find a team. He had prepared a personal profile with his name, gender, stating that he belongs to the Star Beast Tamer class, has 1 contracted beast, no team history, and does not request any payment. Even so, no matter how many teams he approaches, none of them accepts him. Sichin realizes that beast tamers really are at the bottom of the food chain in that place, so he probably should have lied about his class and hidden Leo. But at that moment, a girl runs past and is amazed by how beautiful the little cub is. Leo begins crying and the girl becomes worried, asking what happened. The protagonist explains that he is not merely a cub, but a lion and more precisely, a beast belonging to the lion race. As soon as she sees the protagonist's badge, she thinks about his name and asks whether he is looking for a team. He says yes because his pet needs to level up. The girl thinks that is a huge coincidence because she has just obtained a den, but she does not have enough people to clear it. She is Soliai Hei, a D-rank warrior. She points out that even though it is only a D-rank den, it is still quite dangerous. But if they want, they can go together. Without thinking twice, the protagonist accepts. Half an hour later, on the outskirts of the city, in an abandoned field, the same man who had rejected the protagonist the first time becomes irritated when he sees that stray cat again. Soliai is surprised and asks whether the two of them know each other. The man says yes because he already rejected that brat once. So why the hell did she bring him there when he has no team history? The other young man says that it does not matter because the more people they have, the better, since they need to give beginners a chance. The first man says that he simply hates having to carry dead weight in exchange for free experience. But the protagonist remains silent and simply looks at them. Soliai asks them to stop arguing and explains that their team has 3 D ranks, all of them experienced. But that den is completely unknown, so no one can lower their guard. Once they enter, Vice Captain Gideon Lee and she will hold the front line. Nolan Gua, an E-rank lightning assassin, needs to flank and clear the path. Chuck Milo needs to stay with Holly, an E-rank enchanter, to keep the rear secure. Meanwhile, the protagonist needs to find an opening and deal as much damage as he can. Gideon tells his captain to relax a little, because this will be extremely easy since he has already cleared more than a dozen dens of that type. As soon as they enter through an opening and jump inside, she uses some of her abilities to illuminate the area. Gideon immediately starts complaining, asking why this is a lightning-type den. The captain asks everyone to stay as alert as possible, but at that moment, the dead weight is the first one to be attacked like an idiot. The captain shouts for everyone to maintain formation. The vice captain, who is supposedly incredibly strong and constantly carries dead weight, merely screams like a frightened little girl and needs to be saved by the captain. She asks whether he did not claim to be experienced, because that thing is only an E-rank rat. So why is he panicking like that? Gideon shouts that nobody told him this was a lightning-type den, since lightning counters flora, not to mention that thing is disgusting. While the two of them begin getting attacked and can barely dodge, Nolan evades with ease. Seeing that his team is at a disadvantage, the protagonist asks Leo to take action. Meanwhile, Ling Yu asks Gong Chun whether all of his onboarding paperwork is in order. He says yes, but he is only thinking about the protagonist because Si Chun pulled another crazy stunt that day by refusing to join the Imperial Guild. And now he is walking around claiming that he founded his own guild. Ling Yu is surprised by the information and asks whether that is really true. Gong Chun says yes, and on top of that, the protagonist even had the nerve to try to recruit his older brother in front of everyone, as if he would ever work with people like that. So they can safely say that there is something seriously wrong inside that boy's head. Ling Yu is simply trying to understand what exactly that boy is planning, and what his true identity really is. She remembers the conversation she had with their vice president. He rejects the idea, saying that the protagonist is not glutton. Ling Yu asks how he can be so certain about that. Carl explains that if Si Chun really were glutton, why would he waste such a golden opportunity during the graduation exam? Gong Yun and the examiners were trapped inside with him, meaning he could have done anything he wanted. Ling Yu thinks that perhaps he did nothing because too many people were watching that exam, and any accident with so much attention focused on him would immediately cause all suspicion to fall on him. The vice president knows that she has very good reasons to be suspicious, but asks her to trust him a little more. The glutton they are hunting is definitely not that boy. Sometimes, she needs to feel who people really are with her heart instead of judging them from behind a wall of suspicion. Back in the present, she decides to look up the protagonist's guild registration, and realizes that it was filed a month ago, and that cannot be a coincidence, because killing someone at point-blank range during such an important exam would be far too risky and easy to get caught. But founding his own guild is the perfect disguise. That way, he can lure people deep into some forgotten den, eliminate all of them, and avoid raising any suspicion. That is exactly how a Portia operates. There is a group among the awakened known as Portia. They hide without raising suspicion, and the moment their prey falls into the trap, they discard their masks and move in for the kill. People like that are usually textbook sociopaths, ruthless and brutal, without even the slightest trace of empathy, killing their own kind simply because they enjoy it. Back in the protagonist's battle, Leo easily restrains all the rats and uses Star Mage, star-strangling ring, destroying every monster simultaneously and leaving all the participants impressed. In addition, the little lion also manages to level up. A short while later, they reach the depths of the den, all thanks to the crowd control Leo provided. Without him, they would have been destroyed. Gideon thinks that if this were a star-type den, things would be much better than in this disgusting den. But now they have two paths ahead of them and need to choose one. Nolan thinks it would be better to take the path on the right because low-ranking lords like to hide in narrow, confined places to confuse intruders, and he has seen this before so they can trust him. The captain thinks it is best to follow the plan and decides to take the path on the right. As they walk, she points out that the lord of a D-rank den can easily possess C-rank strength. The moment they see the boss, they need to throw everything they have directly at it without giving it any chance to breathe. While everyone continues forward, the protagonist takes the opportunity to check all of their rankings. He is pleased that Leo showed good combat instincts during the ambush and also knows how to fight well as part of a team. If they clear that den, Leo should reach D rank. Up to that point, everything is going exactly according to plan. The only thing that does not make much sense is Nolan. His ranking does not appear. He tells everyone that he is only E rank, but he obviously possesses far more strength than he lets on. In addition, the demonic heart failed to detect any B rank or higher reading, which means that man is hiding his true strength, just like the protagonist.